The divorce papers hit the table like a death sentence. 7 years of marriage, gone in a signature. Marcus Hale didn't even look up from his phone as he slid them across the marble countertop. Sign it, Evelyn. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. She stared at the documents, hands trembling, wedding ring suddenly feeling like a noose around her finger. He didn't know, couldn't know. The quiet wife he was discarding controlled more wealth than he'd ever touch in 10 lifetimes. But she'd hidden it all, for love. What a fucking mistake that had been. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and failure. Evelyn Ward stood at the stove, stirring a pot of soup that nobody would eat, watching steam curl toward the ceiling like the last remnants of hope leaving her body. Outside, Charleston's October sun was dying, bleeding orange across the old brick facades and wrought iron gates that made this neighborhood look like something out of a postcard. Picture perfect, suffocating. She'd learned to hate perfection. The front door opened. Marcus. She could tell by the weight of his footsteps, heavy, entitled, the walk of a man who believed the world owed him something. 7 years of marriage had taught her to read him like a weather pattern. Predict the storms, brace for impact. Evelyn. His voice cut through the kitchen's warmth. No honey, no babe, just her name, flat and transactional. She turned off the burner, wiped her hands on a dish towel that had seen better days. You're home early. We need to talk. 4 words. They landed in her chest like buckshot. Marcus walked past her without touching, without even looking at her really, and dropped his briefcase on the counter with a thud that made the wine glasses rattle. He was handsome in that corporate way, sharp jaw, expensive haircut, eyes that knew how to charm investors and close deals. She'd fallen for that once, believed the promises that came wrapped in late-night conversations and Sunday morning breakfast in bed. Stupid. So goddamn stupid. He pulled an envelope from his briefcase. Manila. Legal-sized. The kind of envelope that changes lives. What is that? She already knew. Something in her gut had known for weeks, maybe months. The late nights. The cologne that smelled different. The way he'd stopped saying her name like it meant something. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He set the envelope on the counter between them, like a referee placing a weapon at center ring. His fingers drummed once, twice, against the marble. I'm not happy, Evelyn. The words should have hurt more, should have cut deeper. But she'd felt this coming, felt it building like pressure behind her eyes, and now that it was here, all she felt was numb. Okay, she said quietly. Okay? He looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. That's all you've got? What do you want me to say, Marcus? I don't know. Something, anything. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the careful styling. Jesus Christ, Evelyn, you're so fucking passive. That's the problem. That's always been the problem. Her jaw tightened. Passive. The word tasted like poison. She wanted to laugh, wanted to scream, wanted to tell him exactly how unpassive she could be if she stopped playing this role she'd carved out for herself. But she didn't. She stood there, hands folded in front of her like a schoolgirl waiting for dismissal. Open it, Marcus said, nodding at the envelope. She did. Slowly. The papers inside were exactly what she'd expected. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Her name. His name. 7 years reduced to legal jargon and checkbox options. There's a settlement offer in there too, Marcus continued. His voice had shifted into business mode now, the same tone he used when negotiating contracts. I think you'll find it's more than fair. The house is paid off. You can keep it. I'll cover 6 months of living expenses while you get back on your feet. Find a job, maybe, or go back to school. Whatever you want to do. Get back on your feet, like she was some charity case he'd been propping up. How generous, she heard herself say. Marcus frowned. I'm trying to be decent about this, Ev. Don't call me that. What? Ev, don't call me that anymore. Silence dropped between them like a curtain. Marcus shifted his weight, uncomfortable now, and she realized with sudden clarity that he'd expected this to be easier. Expected her to cry, maybe. Beg him to stay. Instead, she was just standing there, reading through divorce papers like they were a grocery list. There's someone else, he said finally. I think you should know. Of course there was. There was always someone else. Men like Marcus didn't leave unless they had somewhere better to go. Who? The question came out flat, emotionless. Cassandra Voss. The name hung in the air. Evelyn knew it. Everyone in their social circle knew it. Cassandra Voss, daughter of Richard Voss, the real estate and finance magnate whose face appeared on Forbes covers like clockwork. Blonde, beautiful, connected. Everything Evelyn had chosen not to be. How long? She asked. Does it matter? How long? Marcus sighed. 4 months, maybe 5. Maybe 5 months. While she'd been cooking his dinners and pressing his shirts and playing the devoted wife, he'd been fucking someone else. Someone richer. Someone whose last name opened doors. Something dark and cold started to unfurl in Evelyn's chest. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter. More dangerous. I see, she said softly. Cassandra and I are serious, Marcus continued, and there was something almost defensive in his tone now. She understands my ambitions, my goals. She comes from a world where people actually do things, Evelyn. They don't just exist. Just exist. The words hit like a slap. You think I just exist? Her voice was still quiet, but there was an edge to it now, something sharp working its way to the surface. Don't you? Marcus crossed his arms. What do you do, Evelyn? Really? You volunteer at some dusty archive nobody visits. You garden. You cook meals I barely have time to eat. You're a ghost in your own life. I chose this life. Why? Why would anyone choose this? He gestured around the kitchen, at the modest appliances, the secondhand furniture, the life they'd built on his salary because she'd insisted they didn't need more. You could be something. Do something. Instead, you're just here. Taking up space. Taking up space. Dead weight. A ghost. Each word was a nail. She felt them going in. Sign the papers, Marcus said, his voice gentler now, like he'd landed the killing blow and could afford to be merciful. Move on. Find someone who appreciates whatever it is you're looking for. This isn't working. You know it isn't. Evelyn looked down at the divorce papers. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. Everything had gone very still inside her, like the moment before a storm breaks. There's a pen in the envelope, Marcus added. We can finish this tonight. Clean break. Clean break. As if 7 years could be severed with a signature and a handshake. She picked up the pen, felt its weight. Marcus watched her, something like relief washing over his features. This was going to be easy. She was going to make it easy. Predictable Evelyn? Passive Evelyn. Evelyn who never made waves. The pen hovered over the signature line. Actually, she said, setting it down, I need some time. Marcus's expression darkened. Time for what? To think. There's nothing to think about, Evelyn. It's over. We both know it's over. Then a few days won't matter. Jesus Christ, Marcus grabbed the papers, shoving them back into the envelope. Fine, think. But I'm not waiting forever. I have a life to build. With Cassandra. In her world. Where people actually mattered. He left the envelope on the counter and walked out. No goodbye. No last look. Just gone. She heard him upstairs, moving through their bedroom, gathering things. 20 minutes later, the front door opened and closed with a finality that echoed through the empty house. Evelyn stood in the kitchen for a long time after he left. The soup had gone cold. The sun had finished setting. Shadows crept across the tile floor like they were claiming territory. She picked up her phone, stared at it. There was a number in her contacts she hadn't called in 7 years. A number she'd promised herself she'd never need again. Victor Ardent, her family's strategist. The man who'd helped her disappear into this life. The man who could help her disappear out of it. Her thumb hovered over his name. One call. That's all it would take. One call, and the machinery would start moving. The protocols would activate. The world Marcus thought he knew would tilt on its axis. But once she made this call, there was no going back. The quiet life she'd built, the normal life, the safe life, would be gone forever. She'd be Evelyn Varelli again, heir to a global empire, untouchable, powerful, alone. She pressed call. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, a voice answered, smooth, professional, unsurprised. Miss Varelli, it's been a long time. Just hearing her real name out loud after 7 years made her knees weak. She sat down at the kitchen table, gripping the phone like a lifeline. Victor? I assume this isn't a social call. No. What do you need? Such a simple question. What did she need? Revenge? Justice? To make Marcus Hale regret every word he'd just said? To burn down the perfect little world he was building with Cassandra Voss? Everything, she said quietly. I need everything back. Silence on the other end. Then, understood. I'll have the team assembled by morning. Where are you? Charleston. I'll send a car. 6 a.m. Pack light. You won't be coming back. The line went dead. Evelyn sat in the dark kitchen, phone still pressed to her ear, and felt something shift inside her. The woman Marcus had called a ghost was already fading. Something else was taking her place, something he should have been afraid of all along. She stood up, walked upstairs. In their bedroom, his bedroom now, she opened the closet and pulled out a small suitcase. Not the nice luggage Marcus had bought for the honeymoon they'd taken to Bali. The old leather one she'd brought with her 7 years ago, covered in stickers from places most people couldn't afford to visit. She packed mechanically, a few changes of clothes, her laptop, a small wooden box from the back of her jewelry drawer. Inside the box was something she hadn't worn in 7 years. A ring. Not a wedding ring. A signet ring. Heavy gold. Engraved with a family crest that would make most CEOs stand up a little straighter. She slipped it on her right hand. It fit perfectly. Like it had been waiting. The house felt different now. Smaller. Like a costume she'd worn too long. She walked through it one last time, trailing her fingers along the walls she'd painted. The shelves she'd filled with secondhand books. The life she'd built from scratch because she'd wanted to prove that she could be normal. That she could be loved for who she was, not what she had. What a fucking joke. In the bathroom, she stared at herself in the mirror. Same face, same dark hair pulled into a messy bun. Same simple clothes. But her eyes had changed. There was something harder there now. Something that had been sleeping. She didn't sleep that night. Didn't even try. She sat in the living room in the dark and waited for 6 a.m. like a prisoner waiting for execution. Except she wasn't being executed. She was being resurrected. At 5:47, headlights swept across the front windows. A black car. Expensive. The kind of car that didn't belong in this neighborhood. Evelyn grabbed her suitcase and walked out without looking back. The driver was young, professional, and smart enough not to ask questions. He opened the door for her, took her bag, and they pulled away from the curb as the first hints of dawn started bleeding into the sky. They drove for 6 hours. Charleston to Charlotte. Private airport. A jet with the Betrayal logo on the tail. Subtle, elegant, worth more than most people's houses. Victor was waiting on the tarmac. He looked exactly the same. Silver hair, tailored suit, eyes that missed nothing. He'd been her father's right hand for 30 years before her father died. Now he was hers, whether she wanted him or not. Miss Varelli. He extended his hand. She shook it. Evelyn. Of course. Evelyn. He gestured toward the plane. We have a lot to discuss. Shall we? Inside the jet, it all came flooding back. The smell of leather and expensive scotch. The weight of power. The isolation that came with a last name that made strangers either grovel or scheme. Victor waited until they were airborne before he spoke. I've taken the liberty of preparing a brief. Your current assets, holdings, and market position. It's extensive. He handed her a tablet. She scrolled through it, watching numbers blur past. Billions. Properties. Companies. Investments that had been growing quietly for 7 years while she played house with a man who thought she was nobody. The board will want to see you, Victor continued. There are decisions that have been delayed pending your return. Acquisitions. Restructuring. Your presence is required. Where are we going? New York, the Manhattan office. I've arranged accommodation at the residence. The residence. A penthouse that took up the entire top floor of a building her family owned. She'd grown up there. Left it behind when she married Marcus because he'd wanted to make his own way, build his own life, and dragging a billionaire heiress along for the ride didn't fit the narrative. What does he know? Evelyn asked suddenly. Victor raised an eyebrow. Your husband? Ex-husband. Almost. Marcus Hale knows nothing. As per the original protocol, all traces of your identity were sealed. background, records, everything. As far as the world knows, Evelyn Ward appeared 7 years ago with a modest trust fund and a desire for privacy. And now? Now? Victor's smile was thin. Now we activate phase 2. Which is? You tell me. What do you want, Evelyn? She stared out the window at the clouds below. What did she want? To make Marcus hurt? To destroy him? To take back everything he'd made her feel small for giving up? I want him to understand, she said quietly. I want him to know exactly what he threw away. Revenge, then. No. She turned back to Victor. Revelation. I want him to see who I actually am. And then I want to watch him realize he never stood a chance. Victor nodded slowly. That can be arranged. Mr. Hale works for Sterling and Cross, correct? Mid-level portfolio manager. Decent reputation, but nothing extraordinary. He wants to be extraordinary. He thinks Cassandra Voss is his ticket. The Voss family. Victor pulled up a file on his own tablet. Richard Voss. Real estate and private equity. Net worth approximately $18 billion. One daughter, Cassandra. No sons. She's being positioned as his successor. Marcus thinks she's his golden ticket. And you want to cut the chain before he can climb it? No. Evelyn's voice went cold. I want to remove the ladder entirely. Victor smiled, actually smiled. Now you sound like your father. They landed in New York just after noon. The city sprawled below them, gray and massive and indifferent. Evelyn had forgotten what it felt like to see New York from above, to know that somewhere down there was a building with her name on it, an empire waiting for her to remember she owned it. The car that met them at the airport was even nicer than the one in Charleston. The driver knew better than to make eye contact. They cut through Manhattan traffic like they owned the roads, maybe they did, and pulled up to a building on the Upper East Side that made the surrounding architecture look apologetic. Home. The elevator required a fingerprint scan. Hers still worked. 30 floors up, the doors opened directly into the penthouse. Evelyn stepped out and felt the past slam into her. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Art on the walls worth more than most people made in a lifetime. It smelled the same, felt the same, like stepping into a memory she'd tried to bury. Your rooms are prepared, Victor said. I've scheduled a board meeting for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. It will be intense. Many of them have been running things in your absence. They won't want to relinquish control easily. Let them try. Victor's smile returned. Indeed. Is there anything else you need tonight? Information on Marcus, on Cassandra, on the Voss Empire. I want to know every pressure point, every weak joint, every place where applying the right leverage will make the whole thing crumble. I'll have it on your desk by morning. He left her alone. Evelyn walked through the penthouse slowly, reacquainting herself with the life she'd abandoned. Her old bedroom was exactly as she'd left it, the bed made, the books on the shelves, like she'd only been gone for a weekend. She sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out her phone. No calls from Marcus. No texts. He was probably with Cassandra right now, celebrating his liberation from dead weight. She should feel something. Anger, hurt, betrayal. But all she felt was cold calculation. Marcus wanted to climb? Fine. Let him climb. Let him get close enough to see the summit. Then she'd kick the mountain out from under him. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Welcome home, Miss Varelli. She deleted it. There would be hundreds more now that word was spreading. Business partners, competitors, vultures circling a throne that had been empty too long. Let them circle. Tomorrow, she'd remind them who she was. Remind them what the name Varelli meant. And soon, very soon, Marcus Hale would learn the same lesson. She stood up, walked to the windows, and looked out at the city. Somewhere down there, Marcus was building his new life. Somewhere down there, he was laughing at the ghost he'd left behind. He had no idea she was already coming for him. And when she struck, it wouldn't be with anger or desperation or the messy emotions of a discarded wife. It would be with the cold precision of a woman who just remembered she didn't need anyone's permission to be exactly who she'd always been. The storm was gathering, and Marcus Hale was standing right in its path. The boardroom on the 43rd floor smelled like old money and older grudges. Evelyn stood outside the glass doors at 8:47 a.m., watching the men inside settle into their leather chairs like kings claiming thrones. 12 of them, all over 50, all white, all convinced they'd been running this empire just fine without her. Victor appeared at her elbow, tablet in hand. They're ready for you. Are they? No, but that's the point. She pushed through the doors without knocking. The conversation died mid-sentence. 12 heads turned. 12 sets of eyes widened just slightly, the only crack in their practiced composure. Gentlemen. Evelyn walked to the head of the table where her chair sat empty, had been empty for 7 years. She didn't sit. Thank you for keeping my seat warm. Gerald Hastings recovered first. He was the oldest, the one who'd served under her father the longest, and he wore his seniority like armor. Miss Varelli, this is unexpected. Is it? She placed both hands on the back of her chair. I own 63% of this company. My absence was temporary, not permanent. Of course. Gerald's smile didn't reach his eyes. We're simply surprised you didn't give us more notice. There are protocols. Evelyn let the word hang. You mean the protocols you've been using to make decisions worth billions without my approval? Silence crashed through the room. Someone's pen stopped moving. Someone else's coffee cup paused halfway to their mouth. Gerald shifted in his seat. We've been operating under the assumption that you wish to remain uninvolved. Your instructions 7 years ago were quite clear. My instructions were to maintain operations in my absence, not to treat my inheritance like your personal playground. Now wait just a minute. This from Thomas Brennan, VP of Acquisitions, red-faced and puffing up like a threatened bird. Sit down, Thomas. Evelyn's voice didn't rise, but something in it made him sink back into his chair. All of you, sit. They sat. Even Gerald, though it took him a beat longer than the others. Evelyn finally took her seat. The leather still fit her perfectly. She pulled up the files Victor had prepared, projected them onto the screen behind her. Numbers, deals, acquisitions that had been approved in her name without her signature. The Singapore development, the German manufacturing merger, the biotech startup in California. She let each item flash across the screen. Collectively worth $94 billion. Who approved these? No one answered. The air in the room had gone sharp, dangerous. I'll ask again. Who approved these? Gerald cleared his throat. The board voted. The board doesn't have voting rights on acquisitions over $10 billion. Only I do. It's in the charter my great-grandfather wrote, the same charter you've been conveniently ignoring. We were acting in the company's best interests, Gerald said, and now there was steel in his voice. You disappeared, Evelyn, 7 years without a word. What were we supposed to do? Let opportunities pass because you were off playing house in South Carolina? Playing house. The same words Marcus had used. Different mouth, same poison. Evelyn stood up slowly, walked around the table. Gerald didn't flinch when she stopped behind his chair, but the muscle in his jaw twitched. Tell me, Gerald, in those 7 years, how much did your personal portfolio grow? That's not 43%. I checked. Impressive returns, almost like you had insider knowledge of which acquisitions would pay out the biggest dividends. Gerald's face went white. Around the table, the other board members suddenly found their notepads fascinating. Are you accusing me of something? Gerald asked quietly. I'm stating facts. You used company resources to enrich yourself. So did Thomas. And Richard. And probably half this table. She walked back to her seat. But here's what's going to happen. You're all going to sign new contracts with revised compensation structures. No more backdoor deals. No more shadow partnerships. Everything transparent. Everything legal. And if we refuse? Thomas again, still red-faced, still stupid enough to push. Evelyn smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Then I activate the clause in Section 7 of your employment agreements, the one that allows immediate termination for breach of fiduciary duty. You'll lose your positions, your pensions, and your reputations. And I'll make sure every regulatory agency in 3 continents knows exactly what you've been doing. You can't. I can. I will. Test me. The room went silent. Outside the windows, New York sprawled below them, indifferent to the power struggle playing out 43 floors up. Finally, Gerald nodded. We'll sign. Good. Victor will have the contracts ready by end of day. Evelyn gathered her tablet. Meeting adjourned. Oh, and gentlemen, don't mistake my absence for weakness. I'm back. Get used to it. She walked out before anyone could respond. Victor followed her into the hallway, and once the doors closed behind them, she let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her lungs since she entered the room. Well, Victor said mildly, that went better than expected. They hate me. They fear you. That's better. Evelyn leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the meeting was draining fast, leaving behind a hollow ache. How long until they try to remove me? They won't. Not after that display. Victor pulled up something on his tablet. Besides, you have bigger things to focus on. The Voss file. I finished it last night. Right, Marcus, Cassandra, the real reason she was here. They walked to her office, a corner suite with views that made the boardroom look modest. Victor spread files across her desk like a general planning a campaign. Richard Voss, he began, self-made billionaire, started in construction, expanded into real estate development, then pivoted to private equity. Net worth $18.3 billion, though that number's soft. He's leveraged heavily. How heavily? Debt-to-equity ratio of 3.7. High, but manageable, as long as his holdings maintain value. He has major positions in commercial real estate across 6 countries, with his largest exposure in the Asian markets. Evelyn scanned the documents. Property developments in Singapore, Shanghai, Tokyo. Luxury condos, office buildings, shopping centers, all built on borrowed money and optimistic projections. Vulnerabilities, she asked. Several. His Singapore development is behind schedule and over budget. The Shanghai project is facing regulatory issues. And his Tokyo properties are in a market that's showing signs of correction. Victor pulled up a financial model. If 2 of those 3 projects fail to deliver projected returns, his whole empire becomes unstable. And Cassandra? 28, Stanford MBA, currently VP of Development at Voss Properties. Being groomed to take over, but she's inexperienced. Most of her successes were handed to her by Daddy's connections. Evelyn studied Cassandra's photo. Blonde. Beautiful. The kind of woman who'd never had to fight for anything because people just gave it to her. The kind of woman Marcus wanted. What about Marcus? She almost didn't want to know, but she needed to see the full picture. Victor pulled up another file. Marcus Hale, 34. Portfolio manager at Sterling & Cross. Decent track record, nothing spectacular. Income approximately $400,000 annually. Assets, minimal. He's leveraged too, but on a much smaller scale. Car payments, student loans, a condo mortgage. He's broke. Comparatively, yes, which makes Cassandra Voss very attractive. Richard Voss has been looking for someone to groom as a son-in-law. Someone ambitious but controllable. Marcus fits the profile. Evelyn felt something cold settle in her stomach. Marcus hadn't just left her for another woman. He'd left her for a better deal. An upgrade. A business merger disguised as romance. When's the wedding? She asked flatly. No official announcement yet, but my sources say Richard Voss has been making inquiries with event planners. 6 months, maybe less. 6 months. Marcus would be married into billions, secure, set for life. While she, the woman he'd called dead weight, would be forgotten. Not fucking likely. I want to meet him, Evelyn said suddenly. Victor looked up. Marcus? Richard Voss. That's bold. Can you arrange it? There's a charity gala next week, the Pemberton Foundation benefit. Voss always attends. I can get you on the guest list. Do it. Evelyn stood, pacing to the windows. And I want to start moving on his properties, quietly. Nothing traceable back to me yet. Which properties? All of them. Find out who holds his debt. Buy it. Find out which of his partners are unhappy. Make them offers. Find every crack in his empire and start applying pressure. Victor made notes. This will take time. Months, possibly. I have time. Marcus doesn't know I exist. He's busy playing house with his new girlfriend. He won't see this coming until it's too late. And when he does see it, Evelyn turned back to Victor. Then the real fun begins. The week that followed was a blur of meetings, contracts, and late nights in her office, reviewing financial statements until the numbers blurred together. Evelyn had forgotten what it felt like to run an empire, the weight of it, the constant pressure, the way every decision rippled out into hundreds of lives. She'd also forgotten how good she was at it, By Friday, she'd restructured 3 divisions, fired 2 executives who'd been bleeding the company dry, and approved an acquisition in renewable energy that would position Virelli Industries as a major player in the next decade's power grid. The board had stopped questioning her, started listening instead. But the real work was happening in the shadows. Victor's team had been busy. They'd identified 12 major creditors holding Richard Voss's debt. 7 had agreed to sell. The other 5 were being persuaded. They'd also found something interesting. Marcus Hale had recently opened a new investment account. Large transfers coming in from an offshore source registered to Cassandra Voss. He was already spending her money, already living the life. Evelyn stared at the bank statements and felt nothing. No anger, no jealousy, just cold, clear purpose. The Pemberton Foundation Gala was exactly what she'd expected. Excessive wealth disguised as charity, where rich people paid $5,000 per plate to feel good about themselves for one night. The venue was the Metropolitan Museum, the champagne was imported, and the guest list read like a Forbes Power Rankings. Evelyn arrived late. Intentionally. She wanted an entrance. Victor had helped her prepare. A dress that cost more than Marcus's car, midnight blue silk that moved like water, cut to show just enough to be interesting without trying too hard. Diamonds at her throat and wrists that caught light like controlled explosions. Hair swept up, makeup subtle, but perfect. She didn't look like Evelyn Ward anymore. Didn't look like the woman who'd spent 7 years gardening and volunteering. She looked like money, power, danger. The car pulled up to the museum steps. A valet opened her door. She stepped out into camera flashes. The press was here, documenting who mattered, who was worth photographing. Someone recognized her name. Whispers started spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Virelli. That's Evelyn Virelli. I thought she was dead. Where's she been? Evelyn walked up the steps without acknowledging them. Inside, the museum had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. If fairy tales were written by investment bankers, crystal chandeliers, string quartets, waiters gliding through the crowd with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more per bite than most people's meals. She accepted a glass of champagne she wouldn't drink and started moving through the room. People parted for her. Some stared. Some pretended not to stare. A few brave souls approached, introducing themselves, angling for connection. She smiled, shook hands, exchanged pleasantries that meant nothing. And then she saw him. Richard Voss stood near the back of the room, surrounded by a small court of admirers. He was exactly what she'd expected. 60-something, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of tan that came from owning a yacht. He laughed at something someone said, a big booming laugh that demanded attention. Next to him stood Cassandra, even more beautiful in person. Perfect blonde hair, perfect teeth, perfect dress that probably had its own security detail. And next to Cassandra, looking slightly uncomfortable in a tuxedo that didn't quite fit right, was Marcus. Evelyn's heart didn't skip, didn't race. She just looked at him. The man she'd married, the man who'd called her dead weight. He looked smaller somehow, standing next to Richard Voss, diminished, like a moon orbiting a larger planet. Marcus hadn't seen her yet. He was laughing at something Richard said, that practiced laugh he used when he wanted to impress someone. Evelyn drained her champagne, set the glass on a passing waiter's tray, started walking toward them. Victor materialized at her elbow. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She crossed the room like she owned it. Maybe she did. The Virelli Foundation had donated enough to this museum over the years to name a wing. Richard Voss saw her first. His eyes narrowed slightly, trying to place her face. Then recognition dawned, followed quickly by interest. Miss Virelli. He extended his hand, that big smile spreading across his face. What a surprise. I heard rumors you'd emerged from wherever you've been hiding. Mr. Voss. She shook his hand, firm grip, eye contact. Lovely event. Isn't it? Though between you and me, these things are all the same. Same people, same champagne, same check writing at the end of the night. He gestured to Cassandra. This is my daughter Cassandra, and her friend, Marcus Hale. Friend. Interesting. Cassandra extended a perfectly manicured hand. Lovely to meet you. Likewise. And then Marcus. He'd gone completely still, frozen like someone had hit pause on his life. His face had drained of color. His hand, when Evelyn took it, was clammy. Marcus. She said his name like she'd say any name, casual, meaningless. Evelyn, he stammered over it. What are you? I didn't know you'd be here. Why would you? She released his hand. We barely know each other. The lie landed like a bomb. Marcus's eyes went wide. She could see him calculating, trying to figure out what game she was playing, what she was doing here, why she looked like this, talked like this, stood here among people like Richard Voss, like she belonged. You two know each other? Cassandra asked, curious now. Barely, Evelyn said before Marcus could answer. We crossed paths years ago. Charleston, wasn't it, Marcus? You were just starting out. Yes. Charleston. Richard Voss was watching this exchange with the interest of a man who'd built an empire by reading people. Small world, Marcus here is about to join my firm, head of our new acquisitions division. Congratulations, Evelyn said to Marcus. His eyes were screaming at her, begging her to stop, to explain, to do anything other than stand here pretending they were strangers. Thank you, Marcus managed. Though I have to say, Richard continued, turning to Evelyn, I'm more interested in what you've been up to. 7 years off the grid. That takes discipline. Or desperation. Which was it? Neither. I was tired. Of what? This. She gestured around the room. The performance, the expectations. I wanted to see what it felt like to be normal. And? It was boring. Richard laughed. That big booming laugh again. I like you. We should talk business sometime. I hear Varelli Industries is making moves in Asian markets. So am I. Maybe we can help each other. Maybe, Evelyn smiled. Though from what I understand, you're a bit overextended at the moment. Singapore's bleeding money. Shanghai's a regulatory nightmare. Tokyo's about to correct. That's a lot of exposure for one portfolio. The smile on Richard's face froze. Around them, the conversation had gone very quiet. You've been doing your homework, Richard said slowly. I always do. Those projects are solid, just going through normal development phases. Of course, I'm sure the 12 creditors holding your debt feel the same way. Now Richard's smile disappeared entirely. Excuse me? Nothing. Just making conversation. Evelyn checked her watch, a vintage Patek Philippe that cost more than Marcus made in a year. I should circulate. Lovely meeting you all. Marcus, good seeing you again. She walked away before anyone could respond. Behind her, she could feel Marcus's eyes burning into her back, could almost hear the questions exploding in his head. How? 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 Victor caught up with her near the champagne fountain. That was aggressive. That was a warning shot. Voss isn't stupid. He'll start digging into who you are, what you want. Let him dig. He'll find out soon enough. And Marcus? Evelyn glanced back across the room. Marcus was still standing there, staring after her, while Cassandra and Richard talked animatedly. He looked lost, confused, small. Marcus is collateral damage, she said quietly. He made his choice. Now he gets to live with it. They stayed another hour. Evelyn worked the room, re-establishing connections, reminding people that Varelli wasn't just a name in the history books. She was back. She was active, and she was someone they needed to pay attention to. But her mind kept drifting back to Marcus, to the look on his face when she'd pretended not to know him. She should feel guilty, should feel something. She didn't. The car ride back to the penthouse was quiet. Victor made phone calls, arranging meetings, moving pieces. Evelyn stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. He'll try to contact you, Victor said, hanging up his latest call. Who? Marcus. Tonight, probably. He'll want answers. Block his number. Already done. Back at the penthouse, Evelyn kicked off her heels and poured herself a real drink. Scotch. Her father's scotch, aged 30 years, kept in a crystal decanter that was probably older than she was. She stood at the windows, looking out at Central Park, and waited. Marcus didn't disappoint. Her phone, her personal phone, the one only a handful of people had the number to, started ringing at 11:47 p.m. She didn't recognize the number, but she knew it was him. She answered. Evelyn. His voice was ragged, desperate. What the fuck is going on? Hello, Marcus. Don't hello, Marcus me. What are you doing? Who are you? What was that at the gala? I don't know what you mean. Bullshit. Evelyn Varelli? The dress, the jewelry, talking to Richard Voss like you're equals? What the hell is happening? She took a sip of scotch. Let the silence stretch. You wanted a divorce, Marcus. You got one. What I do with my life now is none of your business. None of my... He laughed, sharp and brittle. You lied to me. For 7 years you lied. I never lied. You told me you were nobody. I never said that. You decided I was nobody. I just didn't correct you. More silence. She could hear him breathing hard, could picture him pacing, running his hands through his hair like he did when he was stressed. Why? He finally asked. Why hide it? Because I wanted someone to love me for who I was, not what I had. I did love you. No, Marcus. You loved the idea of me. The supportive wife who didn't ask for much, who made your life easy. The second I stopped being useful, you threw me away. That's not, you called me dead weight. You said I was taking up space. You handed me divorce papers like I was an employee being laid off. Her voice was still calm, but there was ice underneath now. So I signed them, and now I'm moving on. With Richard Voss, you're going after him because of me and Cassandra? Don't flatter yourself. My business decisions have nothing to do with you. I don't believe you. I don't care. Evelyn, please. We need to talk, really talk, face to face. No. I deserve answers. You deserve exactly what you're getting. She finished her scotch. Goodbye, Marcus. Don't call this number again. She hung up, blocked the number, poured another drink. The phone didn't ring again. Over the next 3 weeks, Evelyn moved like a chess player executing a long game. She bought up more of Richard Voss's debt, started making quiet inquiries to his business partners, put pressure on his Singapore development through regulatory channels in markets where Varelli had influence. Nothing obvious, nothing traceable, just small moves that added up, and watched as Marcus's world started to crack. It was subtle at first, a deal falling through, a client pulling out, small setbacks that could be explained away as bad luck, but they kept happening. Marcus's new position at Voss Properties, the one that was supposed to launch him into the big leagues, kept getting delayed. Richard was restructuring, needed more time. Market conditions were uncertain. Evelyn watched it all through Victor's reports, feeling nothing, until the night Marcus showed up at her building. Security called up at 2 a.m. Miss Varelli, there's a Marcus Hale in the lobby. He's insistent. She should have told them to remove him, should have had security throw him out. Instead, she said, send him up. She was still dressed, still awake, still working through financial projections for the quarter. She'd stopped sleeping normal hours, stopped pretending she needed rest. The elevator doors opened. Marcus stepped out. He looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled suit, eyes bloodshot, like he'd been drinking or crying or both. You shouldn't be here, Evelyn said without looking up from her laptop. You're destroying me. His voice cracked. Everything I've worked for, everything I've built, it's falling apart. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate? He walked toward her, fists clenched. You're doing this. I know you are. The deal's falling through, Richard pulling back, my reputation at the firm. It's all you. Prove it. I don't need to prove it, I know. Now she looked up, met his eyes. Then what do you want, Marcus? An apology? Mercy? Should I stop and let you have your fairy tale ending with Cassandra? I want to understand why. Why are you doing this? Because I can. That's it? That's your reason? What other reason do I need? She stood up, walked toward him. You made a choice, Marcus. You chose to leave, chose to call me worthless, chose to trade me in for a better model. Those were your decisions. Now you get to live with the consequences. I made a mistake. Yes, you did. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air between them. Marcus looked at her with something like hope, like maybe this was all some test he could pass with the right combination of words. Evelyn felt nothing. Your apology means nothing to me, she said quietly. You're only sorry because you found out who I really am, because you realized what you lost. If I was still just Evelyn Ward, you wouldn't be here. You'd be happy with Cassandra, living your upgrade. That's not true. It is, and we both know it. She walked back to her laptop. You need to leave. Evelyn, please. I said leave. I'm not done. You are. She hit a button on her desk. Security will escort you out. If you come back, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. 2 security guards stepped off the elevator. Large men, unsmiling. Marcus looked at them, looked at Evelyn. Something broke in his expression. I loved you, he said, one last desperate attempt. No, Marcus, you didn't. You loved what I could have been if I'd been someone different, someone smaller, someone who made you feel big. She turned back to her screen. Now you get to be small all by yourself. The guards took him away. Evelyn sat back down at her laptop and tried to focus on the numbers in front of her, but her hands were shaking. She'd crossed a line tonight. There was no going back now. Marcus knew she was coming for him. Richard Voss would figure it out soon if he hadn't already. The war was about to go from shadow ops to open combat, and she was ready. Let them come. Let them try to stop her. She'd spent 7 years being small, being quiet, being nothing. Never again. Her phone buzzed. Victor. Turn on channel 7. She grabbed the remote, switched to the news, and there it was. Breaking. Voss Properties under investigation for financial irregularities. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen while a reporter spoke about allegations of debt manipulation, questionable accounting practices, potential fraud. Evelyn hadn't done this, hadn't leaked anything. But someone had. Her phone rang again. Victor. That wasn't us, he said immediately. I know. Which means someone else is going after Voss. Or Voss has more enemies than we thought. On screen, the report continued. Federal investigators, subpoenas, Richard Voss's empire cracking open like an egg. And somewhere in that empire was Marcus, tied to a sinking ship. Evelyn should feel victorious, should feel satisfied. Instead, she just felt tired. What do you want to do? Victor asked. She watched the news cycle through footage of Richard Voss's properties, Cassandra looking shocked outside their Manhattan office. And finally, just for a moment, Marcus walking away from reporters, hand up to block cameras. Let it play out, she said finally. We hold position. Watch. Wait. And if they come after you? Then we show them exactly what happens when you underestimate a Virelli. She hung up, turned off the TV, sat in the dark penthouse, and listened to the city breathe 40 stories below. The point of no return had arrived, and Evelyn walked past it without looking back, knowing that on the other side was either total victory or complete destruction, and she honestly couldn't tell anymore which one she was hoping for. And that uncertainty was the only honest thing she'd felt in weeks. The investigation into Voss Properties moved like wildfire through dry brush. Within 48 hours, 3 major creditors had frozen Richard Voss's lines of credit. Within 72, the SEC had issued subpoenas for every financial document dating back 5 years. By the end of the week, Richard Voss's face was plastered across every financial news outlet with words like fraud and collapse and criminal charges, hovering around his silver hair like vultures. Evelyn watched it all from her office, feeling like she'd lit a match and accidentally burned down a forest. This wasn't her doing, not directly, but her moves had weakened the structure enough that when someone else struck, the whole thing came down. We need to talk about exposure, Victor said, standing in her doorway at 7 a.m. on Monday morning. He looked like he hadn't slept. The investigation is spreading. They're looking at everyone who had financial dealings with Voss in the last 3 years. We haven't had dealings with Voss. Not officially, but we bought his debt. Through shell companies, yes. But if investigators dig deep enough... Victor trailed off, letting the implication hang. Evelyn set down her coffee. They'll find connections to Virelli Industries. Exactly. And then they'll start asking why. Why were we positioning against Voss? What did we know? When did we know it? We didn't know about the fraud. Can you prove that? She couldn't. That was the problem. Her entire play against Richard Voss had been based on legitimate market analysis, his over-leverage, his risky developments, his exposure to volatile markets. But now that he was under criminal investigation, every move she'd made looked suspicious, looked coordinated, looked like insider trading or market manipulation or a dozen other things that could bring federal investigators to her door. What's our liability? She asked. Victor pulled out his tablet, started scrolling through documents. Hard to say. Technically, we did nothing illegal. But optics matter. If it looks like we were profiting from advanced knowledge of Voss's criminal activity, I didn't have advanced knowledge. I know. But proving that in court is different than knowing it in this room. Evelyn stood up, paced to the windows. The city looked different in the harsh morning light. Less glamorous, more exhausted. Like it had been up all night making bad decisions and was just now facing the consequences. What do you recommend? She asked. Full transparency. Cooperate with investigators before they come looking. Show them our analysis was based on public information and market fundamentals. Distance ourselves from Voss completely. And Marcus? Victor paused. What about him? He's tied to Voss. If Voss goes down for fraud, Marcus goes down with him. That's not your problem. I know, I'm just... She trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. What was she doing? Gloating? Feeling guilty? She couldn't tell anymore. The lines had blurred. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Answer it, Victor said quietly. Could be important. She picked up. Yes? Miss Varelli? A woman's voice. Professional, tight. This is Jennifer Caldwell with the Securities and Exchange Commission. I need to schedule a meeting with you regarding your recent transactions involving Voss properties. Evelyn's stomach dropped. I'm happy to cooperate. Should I have my legal team present? That would be advisable. How's tomorrow morning? 9 a.m.? Our office is downtown. I'll be there. The line went dead. Evelyn set down her phone very carefully, like it might explode. Victor was already typing on his tablet, mobilizing the legal team, preparing briefs, building their defense. This is fine, he said, though his voice was tight. We expected this. We're prepared. Are we? Yes. We did nothing wrong, Evelyn. The evidence will show that. Evidence can be interpreted a lot of ways. Not when you have the best lawyers money can buy. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that money and power could insulate her from consequences the way it always had. But something felt wrong, felt off, like she was missing a piece of the puzzle. Her desk phone rang. Internal line. Security. Miss Varelli, there's a Cassandra Voss here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. Evelyn looked at Victor. He shrugged. Send her up, Evelyn said. 5 minutes later, Cassandra Voss stepped off the elevator into Evelyn's office, looking nothing like the perfect woman from the gala. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup, yoga pants, and an oversized sweater. Eyes red and swollen. Thank you for seeing me, Cassandra said, and her voice cracked on the last word. Evelyn gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit. Cassandra sat, looked around the office like she was cataloging everything. The art on the walls, the view, the leather furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Finally, her eyes landed on Evelyn. You did this, Cassandra said. Not angry, just stating a fact. The investigation? No, that wasn't me. But you set it up. You weakened my father, made him vulnerable. Then someone else came in for the kill. Cassandra's hands were shaking. She clasped them together in her lap. I need to know why. Why what? Why you targeted him. My father said you mentioned his debt at the gala. Said you'd done homework. He's been obsessing over it, trying to figure out your angle. She leaned forward. Is it because of Marcus? Evelyn said nothing. It is, isn't it? You're doing this because he left you for me. Cassandra laughed, sharp and bitter. Jesus Christ, all of this, my father's empire collapsing, the investigation, everything, it's because some guy dumped you? You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? I did my own homework, Miss Varelli, found out about your marriage to Marcus Hale, found out it ended right before you reappeared, found out he never knew who you really were. Cassandra stood up, walked to the windows. You hid your identity for 7 years, played normal. Then when he left you, you decided to burn down his new life. That about right? The accuracy stung. Evelyn kept her face neutral. Your father's problems are his own. If he committed fraud, he didn't, Cassandra spun around. That's what I came to tell you. My father is a lot of things. Arrogant, aggressive, sometimes an asshole. But he's not a criminal. Someone planted evidence, falsified documents, set him up. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth, And I think you know who did it. I don't. Bullshit. Cassandra walked back to the desk, planted her hands on it, leaned in close. You started buying up his debt, moving against his properties. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, federal investigators show up with evidence of fraud that didn't exist 6 months ago? That's not coincidence. If your father was framed, that has nothing to do with me. Maybe not directly, but you created the opportunity. You made him vulnerable, and someone took advantage. Cassandra's voice dropped. I need your help. Evelyn almost laughed. Why would I help you? Because if my father goes to prison, Marcus goes down with him. He's so tangled up in our business now, so deep in the financial structures, he'll be implicated too. And I don't think you want that. You don't know what I want, don't I? Cassandra straightened up. You want him to hurt, want him to regret leaving you, but you don't want him destroyed. Not really. There's a difference. Was there? Evelyn wasn't sure anymore. The lines between justice and revenge, between consequence and cruelty, had blurred so badly she couldn't see them. Even if I wanted to help, Evelyn said slowly, what could I do? You have resources, connections, people who owe you favors. Help me find out who really set up my father. Help me clear his name before this destroys everything. And what do I get in return? Cassandra reached into her bag, pulled out an envelope, set it on the desk. The truth about Marcus. Evelyn stared at the envelope. What's in there? Open it. She did. Inside were bank statements, transaction records, emails. She scanned through them, her brain struggling to process what she was seeing. Transfers, large transfers, from Marcus's account to offshore holdings, dates going back 2 years, before he'd even met Cassandra, before he'd filed for divorce. What am I looking at? Evelyn asked, though part of her already knew. Marcus has been embezzling from his clients at Sterling and Cross for the last 2 years. Small amounts at first, then bigger. He needed money, more than he was making legitimately. He was trying to keep up with a lifestyle he couldn't afford. Cassandra sat back down. When he started dating me, he saw an opportunity, got access to my father's business, started skimming from there too. The words landed like punches. Evelyn read through the documents again, slower this time. The evidence was damning, irrefutable. Marcus was a thief. Why are you showing me this? Evelyn asked. Because I think he's the one who framed my father. I think he realized he was about to get caught, so he manufactured evidence to make it look like my father was the criminal. Diverted attention, covered his tracks. Evelyn trailed off. It was insane, except it wasn't. It made a terrible kind of sense. Marcus had always been ambitious, always wanted more. And when legitimate paths closed, people like him found illegitimate ones. I can't prove it yet, Cassandra continued, but I'm close. I just need time. And I need my father's resources intact long enough to prove Marcus is the real criminal. That's where you come in. You want me to stop pressuring your father's creditors? Yes, and I want you to use your influence to slow down the investigation. Buy us time. That could make me look complicit. I know. That's why I'm offering you this. Cassandra tapped the envelope. Marcus goes to prison either way. The question is whether he takes my father down with him or whether justice actually gets served. Evelyn's hands were shaking now. She set down the documents, pressed her palms flat against the desk to steady them. Marcus wasn't just the man who'd abandoned her. He was a criminal, a liar on levels she hadn't imagined, and he'd almost gotten away with it. How long do you need? Evelyn heard herself ask. 2 weeks, maybe 3. That's a long time. It's all the time that there is. Cassandra stood. I'm not asking you to forgive him, or forgive me. I'm asking you to help me save my father from a crime he didn't commit. Evelyn looked at Victor. He'd been silent through the whole exchange, but now he nodded almost imperceptibly. The decision was hers. I'll make some calls, Evelyn said finally. Slow things down. But if you're lying to me, I'm not. If you're protecting Marcus, I'm not. I want him buried. Cassandra's voice was ice. He used me, used my father, almost destroyed everything we've built. I want him to pay for it. After Cassandra left, Evelyn sat in silence for a long time. Victor eventually excused himself to make calls, coordinate with their legal team, start the process of shifting their position from offense to something more neutral. Evelyn pulled up the documents Cassandra had left. Read through them again. And again, looking for holes, for lies, for any sign this was some elaborate trap. She found nothing. The evidence was solid. Marcus Hale wasn't just a bad husband. He was a criminal. And Evelyn had been married to him for 7 years without knowing. What did that say about her judgment? Her instincts? She'd built an empire, commanded boardrooms, made billion-dollar decisions, but she'd slept next to a thief for 7 years and never suspected. Her phone buzzed. Text from Victor. SEC meeting confirmed for tomorrow, 9 a.m. Legal team briefed and ready. She typed back, good. Also need you to make some calls. Slow down the Voss investigation. Buy time. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, that's risky. She typed, do it anyway. The meeting with the SEC was exactly as brutal as she'd expected. 3 hours in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and anxiety, answering the same questions 18 different ways while lawyers on both sides took notes and measured every word. Walk me through your interest in Voss Properties, Jennifer Caldwell said for what felt like the 20th time. She was sharp, early 40s, dark suit, eyes that missed nothing. We identified their debt structure as overextended, Evelyn said, keeping her voice steady. Market analysis suggested their Asian developments were at risk. We saw an opportunity to acquire their obligations at a discount. When did this analysis begin? September, shortly after I resumed active management of Betrayal Industries. And you had no advance knowledge of the fraud allegations? None. Our analysis was based entirely on publicly available financial data. Yet you began positioning against Voss within weeks of returning to your company. That seems remarkably well-timed. Evelyn's lawyer, Patricia Chen, 60 years old and sharp as broken glass, leaned forward. My client's timing was based on market opportunity, not insider knowledge. Unless you have evidence suggesting otherwise, these questions are becoming repetitive. Caldwell smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. We're just trying to understand the timeline, Ms. Chen. Miss Varelli's sudden return from a 7-year absence followed immediately by aggressive positioning against a company that's now under criminal investigation. Surely you can see why that raises questions. I can see why you're doing your job, Patricia said calmly. But correlation isn't causation. Show me evidence of wrongdoing or let my client go. The meeting ended without resolution. No charges, no accusations. But no clearance either, just a promise that the investigation would continue and they'd be in touch. Evelyn walked out of the building feeling like she'd been through a meat grinder. Victor was waiting by the car. How bad? He asked. They don't have anything solid, but they're fishing, and they're not going to stop until they catch something or prove there's nothing to catch. We need to be careful. Every move from here on out gets scrutinized. I know. Evelyn slid into the back seat. Did you make those calls about slowing down Voss? I did. Pulled some strings. The investigation will continue, but at a slower pace. It bought Cassandra her time. Good. Victor gave her a look. You believe her? About Marcus? The evidence is solid. Evidence can be manufactured. Not like that. Not with that level of detail. Evelyn stared out the window. Marcus is dirty. Has been for years. We just never knew. And now that you do know, what are you going to do about it? That was the question, wasn't it? What was she going to do? She'd wanted Marcus to hurt, wanted him to regret leaving her. But this? Watching him go to prison for actual crimes? That felt different, bigger, more permanent. I don't know yet, she admitted. Her phone rang. Unknown number again. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Evelyn? Marcus's voice, ragged, desperate. I know you're screening my calls. I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need 5 minutes, please. She should hang up, should block this number too. Instead, she found herself saying, Where are you? Outside your building. Security won't let me up, but I'll wait. I'll wait all night if I have to. She looked at Victor. He shook his head. Bad idea. Give me 5 minutes, Marcus said again. Then I'll disappear, I swear. Against every instinct, every shred of common sense, Evelyn said, Fine. 5 minutes. Come up. Victor started to object. She held up a hand. I need to hear what he has to say. This is a mistake. Probably, but I'm making it anyway. They rode the elevator up in silence. Victor positioned himself near the elevator doors, arms crossed, making it clear Marcus would have to go through him to get to Evelyn. The elevator doors opened. Marcus stepped out. He looked worse than the last time she'd seen him. Thinner, hollow-eyed, like something inside him had broken and couldn't be fixed. He saw Evelyn, and something in his expression cracked. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing me. You have 5 minutes. Talk." Marcus glanced at Victor. Is there somewhere private?" "No. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here." "Fine. Okay." Marcus ran a hand through his hair. It was shaking. "I know what you think. I know how this looks. But I need you to understand. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Any of what?" "The fraud allegations. Voss, the investigation. I didn't—" He swallowed hard. "I didn't think it would go this far." The words hung in the air. Evelyn felt everything inside her go very still. "What are you saying, Marcus?" "I'm saying I made mistakes. Big mistakes. And now people are getting hurt who shouldn't be hurt, and I don't know how to fix it." "Are you confessing to something?" Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the truth before he even said it. "I took money," he said quietly, "from clients, from the firm. I needed it. The lifestyle, the pressure to keep up, to be someone. I couldn't do it on my salary. So I took a little at first, then more. Then I couldn't stop." "Jesus Christ." Victor's voice was flat, disgusted. "When I met Cassandra, I thought maybe I could fix it. Use her family's resources to cover what I'd taken, then pay it all back. But Richard Voss is smarter than I thought. He started asking questions, running audits. I panicked." "So you framed him," Evelyn said, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Distant, like she was hearing herself from underwater. "I didn't mean to. I needed to redirect attention, buy myself time. So I manufactured some documents. Made it look like Richard was cooking his books, just enough to create doubt, to make investigators look at him instead of me." Marcus's voice cracked. "But it spiraled. It got bigger than I planned. Now he's facing criminal charges, and I can't stop it without implicating myself." Evelyn stared at him. This man she'd married. This man she'd loved. This stranger wearing Marcus Hale's face. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you're the only one who can help me. You have the power, the connections. You can make this go away." "Make what go away?" "The investigation, the charges against Richard. If you wanted to, you could fix this. Clear his name, make them look somewhere else." "Look at you, you mean?" "I'll run. Disappear, leave the country. You'll never see me again. Just help me get out of this. Please, Evelyn, I'm begging you." The audacity was breathtaking. He'd stolen money, framed an innocent man, nearly destroyed a company and every person who worked there, and now he wanted her to save him. "Get out," Evelyn said quietly. "Evelyn, get out." Her voice was still quiet, but there was something deadly underneath it now. "You come into my home and ask me to help you escape consequences for crimes you committed? Are you insane?" "I know it's a lot to ask. It's not a lot. It's everything. It's complicity. You want me to become an accessory to fraud, to evidence tampering, to obstruction of justice. You want me to destroy myself to save you." "I don't have anyone else. That's not my problem." The words came out like a whip crack. "You made these choices, Marcus. You stole. You lied. You framed an innocent man. Those are your sins, not mine. I wouldn't be in this position if you hadn't gone after Voss." There it was, the real reason he'd come. Not to confess, not to apologize, to blame. "I went after Voss because his business was vulnerable. That's not a crime. What you did? That's actual crime. That's prison time, and you deserve every second of it." Marcus's face contorted. "You self-righteous bitch! You think you're so much better than me? You've been manipulating people, destroying lives, using your money and power to crush anyone who crosses you. How is that different? I didn't break the law. Only because you're rich enough to buy your way around it." Victor stepped forward. "Time's up. Leave." "I'm not done." "Yes, you are." Victor's hand went to his phone. "Security is on their way. You can walk out or be carried out. Your choice." Marcus looked at Evelyn one last time. She saw desperation there, fury, and underneath it all, the dawning realization that he'd lost. Completely, irrevocably. "I hope it was worth it," he said bitterly. "Your revenge. I hope it keeps you warm at night when you're alone in this tower you've built. I hope prison gives you time to think about the man you became," Evelyn shot back. "And I hope every night you spend there you remember this moment. Remember that you had chances to be better, to do better, and you chose this instead." Security arrived. Two large men who escorted Marcus to the elevator without ceremony. The doors closed on his face, still twisted in anger and desperation, and then he was gone. Evelyn stood very still, breathing hard. Victor approached cautiously. "Are you okay?" "No." "What do you want to do?" "I want to call Cassandra, tell her I have her proof. Tell her Marcus just confessed everything." "He didn't confess on record. No recording. No witnesses except us. But he did confess. We both heard him." "Your testimony won't hold up in court, not given your relationship history. Defense will argue bias, claim you're fabricating to hurt him." Evelyn walked to the windows, pressed her forehead against the cold glass. "So he gets away with it?" "Not if Cassandra can find actual evidence, but your conversation with him doesn't count." "This is insane. He's a criminal. He admitted it." "I know, but the system doesn't care about what we know. It cares about what we can prove." Evelyn's phone buzzed. Text from Cassandra. "Found something. Need to meet. Tonight. Alone." She showed Victor. He frowned. "Could be a trap. Or it could be the evidence we need. You're not going alone." She said alone. "I don't care what she said. It's not safe." But Evelyn was already texting back. "Where?" The response came immediately. "Battery Park. North End. Midnight." "That's in 3 hours," Victor said, reading over her shoulder. "Public place. Good choice. I'll have a team positioned nearby. Out of sight, but close enough if you need them." "Victor, this isn't negotiable, Evelyn. You've made enough risky choices this week. Let me at least make sure you don't die making another one." She didn't have the energy to argue. "Fine, but they stay back unless I signal." "Agreed." The next 3 hours crawled by. Evelyn tried to work, tried to focus on the dozens of other fires burning across her empire, but her mind kept drifting back to Marcus, to his confession, to the look on his face when he realized she wouldn't save him. She should feel victorious, should feel satisfied that her ex-husband was finally facing real consequences for real crimes. Instead, she just felt hollow. At 11:30, she changed into dark clothes, jeans, a sweater, sneakers, practical, in case things went bad. Victor insisted she wear a wire, a tiny microphone clipped inside her collar that would transmit to his team. "Test," he said into his earpiece. "I can hear you," Evelyn replied. "Good. Remember, signal if you need us. Any sign of trouble, we move in." "I know." The car dropped her at the edge of Battery Park. The water was dark beyond the seawall, the Statue of Liberty's torch burning in the distance like a small, angry star. A few late-night joggers passed by, headphones in, oblivious. Evelyn walked north, hands in her pockets, trying to look casual. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. Cassandra was already there, standing near the railing, looking out at the water. She turned when she heard Evelyn approach. "You came," Cassandra said. "You said you found something." "I did." Cassandra pulled out her phone. "Marcus has a safety deposit box, registered under a false name. I found the key in his apartment. He doesn't know I was there. Inside is a ledger, handwritten, every transaction, every theft, every falsified document. It's all there." She showed Evelyn photos, page after page of Marcus's handwriting, documenting his crimes in meticulous detail. "Why would he keep this?" Evelyn asked. "Insurance, probably. In case someone tried to pin everything on him, he'd have proof of who else was involved. Who knew what? When?" Cassandra put her phone away. "Problem is, we can't use it." "Why not?"
Sa tipo pwede.
"Because I obtained it illegally. Broke into his apartment, no warrant, no legal basis. Any lawyer would get it thrown out in 5 minutes. So what's the point of showing me? The point is now we know it exists, know what we're looking for. We can get a legal warrant, search his place properly, find the box through legitimate channels." That could take weeks. It'll take 3 days if you pull the right strings, make the right calls, get a judge to sign off on the warrant. Evelyn stared at her. You want me to manipulate the legal system? I want you to use your influence to make sure justice actually happens. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Cassandra's voice was sharp. Marcus committed crimes, real crimes. He should pay for them. If you don't help me do this the right way, I'll do it the wrong way. I'll leak the photos, go to the media, start a firestorm. It'll be messy and ugly and probably won't stick, but I'll burn his life down trying. You'd implicate yourself. I don't care anymore. He used me. Used my father. I want him destroyed. The rage in Cassandra's voice was familiar. Evelyn had felt it herself not long ago, had lived in it, let it guide her choices. And look where it had gotten her, standing in a dark park at midnight, contemplating whether to bend the law to serve justice. I'll make the calls, Evelyn said finally. Get you your warrant. Thank you. But after this, we're done. You and I. No more meetings, no more favors. Marcus goes to prison, you go back to your life, and I go back to mine. Agreed. Cassandra started to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For my part in this. I didn't know who you were when Marcus and I started dating. Didn't know he was married when we first got together. By the time I found out, I was already what? Already invested, already seen a future with him. I told myself his marriage was over anyway, that I wasn't really doing anything wrong. Cassandra looked down. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. The apology hung between them. Evelyn wanted to throw it back, wanted to tell Cassandra where she could shove her guilt. But standing there, looking at this woman who'd been used the same way she'd been used, she couldn't muster the anger. He's good at that, Evelyn said quietly. Making you believe what he needs you to believe. Yeah, he is. Cassandra walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the park. Evelyn stood at the railing for a while longer, staring out at the water. Did you get all that? She asked quietly, knowing Victor was listening through the wire. Every word, Victor's voice came through her earpiece. And you're right to help her. Marcus needs to go down. I know. But Evelyn, after this is over, you need to think hard about what comes next. This path you're on, revenge, manipulation, using your power to destroy people, it's changing you, and not for the better. I know that too. She walked back to the car, feeling the weight of the last few weeks settling onto her shoulders like a physical thing. The empire she'd reclaimed, the power she'd wielded, the lives she'd disrupted in pursuit of what? Justice? Revenge? Singe? Validation? By the time she got back to the penthouse, it was almost 2 a.m. She should sleep, needed to sleep. But instead, she poured herself a drink and pulled up the files on her computer. The warrant request. The evidence. The machine she was about to set in motion that would destroy Marcus Hale completely and irrevocably. Her hand hovered over the keyboard. One email. That's all it would take. One message to the right judge, the right prosecutor, the right investigator. The wheels would start turning. Within days, Marcus's apartment would be searched. The safety deposit box would be found. His careful ledger of crimes would become evidence. He'd go to prison for years, maybe decades. And Evelyn would finally get her revenge. Except it didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like exhaustion, like she'd climbed a mountain just to discover the view from the top was exactly the same as the view from the bottom, only now she was too tired to climb back down. She typed the email. Read it over 3 times. Her finger hovered over the send button, and then her computer screen went black. Not just dark. Black. Completely off. What the hell? Evelyn hit keys, tried to restart it. Nothing. The lights in the penthouse flickered, then died. Emergency backup generators should have kicked in immediately. They didn't. Evelyn stood up, heart suddenly racing, reached for her phone. Dead. Completely drained despite being fully charged 5 minutes ago. Victor? She called out. Her voice echoed in the darkness. Victor! No answer. She moved toward where she'd left her bag, her backup phone. The moonlight through the windows provided just enough illumination to navigate. Her hand closed on the bag. Then she heard it. The elevator. Someone was coming up. But the elevator required fingerprint access. Only 3 people had clearance. Her, Victor, and the building's head of security. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime that sounded deafening in the silent penthouse. Footsteps. Multiple people. Evelyn backed away, reaching for something, anything she could use as a weapon. Her hand found a heavy crystal decanter. "Miss Varelli?" A man's voice. Calm. Professional. "Please don't be alarmed. We're not here to hurt you." Lights flicked on. Not the main lights. Flashlights. 3 of them. Held by 3 men in dark suits. One of them stepped forward. He was older, 50s maybe, with gray hair and the kind of face that had seen things. Serious things. "Who the hell are you?" Evelyn demanded. The man reached into his jacket. Evelyn raised the decanter. "Easy," he said, pulling out a badge. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Thomas Kessler. We need you to come with us." "Come with you where?" "Downtown, for questioning." "About what?" "About your involvement in a conspiracy to commit securities fraud, market manipulation, and obstruction of justice." Kessler's voice was maddeningly calm. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you." The Miranda warning faded into white noise. Evelyn's brain was screaming, trying to understand what was happening, how this was happening. "I haven't done anything wrong," she heard herself say. "That's not what our evidence suggests." Kessler nodded to one of the other agents. He stepped forward with handcuffs. Wait! Evelyn backed away. "I have rights. I get a lawyer. I get a phone call. You'll get all of that downtown. Right now, we need you to come with us. Voluntarily is better. But we have a warrant, so one way or another, you're coming." "A warrant for what?" "Your arrest, Miss Varelli. You're being charged as a co-conspirator in the Voss Properties fraud case, along with Marcus Hale, Richard Voss, and 6 others." Kessler pulled out a document, started reading. "Based on evidence that you coordinated with Mr. Hale to manipulate Voss Properties stock prices, profit from insider knowledge of financial irregularities, and obstruct federal investigations into said irregularities." "That's insane. I didn't coordinate with Marcus on anything. I was working against him." "That's not what the emails suggest." "What emails?" Kessler pulled out his phone, showed her a screenshot. An email from her corporate address to an account registered to Marcus Hale. Detailed plans, coordination, strategy. She'd never sent that email, had never even seen it before. "That's not real," she said. "Someone fabricated that. We'll sort all of that out downtown, but right now, Miss Varelli, you need to come with us." The handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Cold metal. Final. Evelyn's mind was racing, trying to find the angle, the escape, the move that would get her out of this. But there was nothing. She'd been outplayed, outmaneuvered. Set up so perfectly, she hadn't seen it coming until the trap had already closed. "Who did this?" she asked Kessler as they walked her toward the elevator. "Who gave you those emails?" "We received them from an anonymous source, along with financial records, transaction logs, and recorded phone conversations between you and Mr. Hale discussing your plans." Recorded conversations. But she'd never discussed plans with Marcus. Never coordinated. Unless someone had manufactured those too. Cut together audio from different sources, created conversations that never happened, built a case out of digital ghosts and carefully manipulated evidence. "Cassandra," Evelyn breathed. It was Cassandra. Kessler didn't confirm or deny, but something in his expression told her she was right. The elevator doors closed. Evelyn stood between 2 FBI agents, hands cuffed behind her back, and realized with absolute clarity that she'd been played from the very beginning. Cassandra hadn't been looking for evidence against Marcus. She'd been building a case against Evelyn, using her rage, her desire for revenge, her willingness to bend rules and manipulate systems to create a perfect frame, and Evelyn had walked right into it. The elevator descended, down toward a lobby full of federal agents and cameras, and the end of everything she'd built. She'd wanted to destroy Marcus Hale. Instead, she'd destroyed herself. And the worst part? She'd done it willingly, eagerly, convinced the whole time she was the one in control. The elevator doors opened to a lobby flooded with artificial light and official voices and the click of cameras and the murmur of voices that meant her life was about to become public spectacle. Evelyn kept her head up, shoulders back, even with her wrists cuffed behind her. She'd be damned if she'd give them the satisfaction of seeing her broken. They walked her through a gauntlet of federal agents and police officers, past windows where she could see news vans already gathering outside like vultures circling fresh meat. Someone had tipped off the media. Of course they had. This was theater, performance. The powerful brought low. America loved that story. The agents loaded her into an unmarked car. No sirens, no drama. Just a quiet ride through Manhattan's pre-dawn streets while the city slept, oblivious to the fact that one of its most powerful residents was being taken downtown in handcuffs. Evelyn's mind wouldn't stop racing. Cassandra had played her perfectly, used her anger, her need for revenge, her willingness to bend the rules, and turned it all into evidence of conspiracy. Every conversation they'd had was now suspect. Every favor Evelyn had called in to slow down the Voss investigation looked like obstruction. Every move she'd made against Richard Voss's empire looked like coordination with Marcus. She'd been so focused on destroying her ex-husband that she hadn't seen the real threat coming from his girlfriend. The FBI field office was exactly what she'd expected. Fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, the smell of bad coffee and bureaucracy. They processed her like a common criminal. Fingerprints, photos, personal effects confiscated. The handcuffs finally came off, replaced by the knowledge that she was in a building surrounded by armed federal agents and there was nowhere to run. Agent Kessler led her to an interrogation room, small, windowless, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, and a camera in the corner with a red light that meant everything she did was being recorded. "Sit," Kessler said. Not unkind, just businesslike. Evelyn sat. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table to hide it. "I want a lawyer," she said. "The first rule of being arrested, shut up and get a lawyer. That's your right. We'll arrange one. But Miss Varelli, I'd strongly suggest you hear what we have to say first. Because the evidence against you is substantial, and cooperation right now could make a significant difference in how this plays out." "I'm not saying anything without counsel present," Kessler sighed, set down a thick folder on the table between them. "Fine, but I'm going to show you something anyway, just so you understand the situation you're in." He opened the folder, started laying out documents, emails, bank statements, phone records, transaction logs, each one damning, each one building a case that Evelyn had conspired with Marcus Hale to manipulate Voss properties, profit from the manipulation, and then obstruct the investigation when it started. "These emails," Kessler said, tapping one, "show coordination between you and Marcus starting 3 months ago, right around the time you returned to New York and resumed control of Varelli Industries. I never sent those emails. They came from your corporate server, your IP address, your access codes. Then someone hacked my system, possibly. We'll investigate that. But right now, the evidence suggests you and Marcus were working together. You'd use your resources and connections to destabilize Voss properties. He'd provide inside information about the company's vulnerabilities. You'd both profit when the stock crashed." "That's insane. Marcus and I weren't even speaking 3 months ago. We were getting divorced. Were you?" Kessler pulled out another document. "Because according to court records, your divorce was never finalized. You never signed the papers, which means legally, you two are still married, still financially entangled, still partners." The realization hit like cold water. She'd taken the divorce papers that night Marcus gave them to her, meant to sign them, then made the call to Victor instead and disappeared into her old life. The papers had been left behind on that kitchen counter in Charleston, unsigned, unfiled. She and Marcus were still married, which meant under the law they were a single financial unit, which meant every transaction she'd made could be interpreted as a joint marital asset decision, which meant the prosecution could argue they were coordinating their finances even if they were physically separated. Cassandra had known that, had used it, built her entire frame around that legal technicality. "I want my lawyer," Evelyn said again. Her voice was steadier now. "I'm not saying another word until I have counsel." Kessler studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, we'll get you a public defender." "I don't want a public defender. I want Patricia Chen. She's my attorney. Her number is in my phone." "Your phone was confiscated as evidence." "Then I want to make my phone call. That's my right." Kessler stood. "One call. Make it count." They took her to a different room, handed her a landline that looked like it belonged in a 1990s police procedural. Evelyn's fingers fumbled with the buttons. She didn't have Patricia's number memorized, didn't have anyone's number memorized anymore because phones did that for you. except one, Victor's personal line. She'd memorized it years ago, back when memorizing important numbers was still something people did. She dialed. It rang 4 times. 5. On the 6th ring, Victor picked up. "Hello?" His voice was rough with sleep. "It's me." Silence. Then, "Jesus Christ, Evelyn, where are you? I've been calling you for hours. Your phones are dead. The penthouse security feeds went dark. I thought, I'm at the FBI field office, downtown. They arrested me. Conspiracy to commit securities fraud. They have emails, Victor. Fabricated emails that make it look like I was coordinating with Marcus." More silence. She could hear him processing, could picture him sitting up in bed, brain already shifting into crisis mode. "How fabricated?" he asked. "Completely. I never sent them. But they came from my server, my IP. Someone hacked in and manufactured the evidence." Cassandra. Yes, this whole thing, the investigation, the frame job on her father, everything. It was designed to trap me. Get me to use my resources to interfere. Build a case that I was conspiring with Marcus. She played me, Victor, and I walked right into it. Okay, listen to me. Don't say anything else, not to anyone. I'm calling Patricia right now. She'll be there within the hour. Do not talk to the FBI. Do not answer questions. Do not. I know the drill. Good. And Evelyn? His voice softened. We'll fix this. I promise. We'll find the evidence, prove the emails were fabricated, expose Cassandra's frame job. But you have to hold on. Can you do that? Could she? Sitting in a federal building in handcuffs, facing charges that could send her to prison for decades, her entire empire crumbling around her? Could she hold on? Yes, she said, because what else was there to say? Good. Patricia will be there soon. Don't give up. The line went dead. They took her back to the interrogation room, left her alone with the camera and the evidence spread across the table. Evelyn stared at the fabricated emails, trying to find some detail, some flaw that would prove they were fake. But whoever had created them had done good work. The headers looked right. The timestamps made sense. The language matched her writing style. If she didn't know for certain she'd never written them, she might believe it herself. The door opened. Patricia Chen walked in looking like she'd gotten dressed in under 5 minutes, but still managed to look more put together than most people did after an hour. She set her briefcase on the table, pulled out a legal pad, and fixed Agent Kessler, who'd followed her in, with a look that could freeze blood. "I need to speak with my client. Alone." "Of course. Take all the time you need." Kessler left, closing the door behind him. Patricia waited 10 seconds, then reached up and put a small device on the table. "Jammer," she said quietly. "They're still recording, but the audio will be scrambled. We have maybe 10 minutes before they realize and shut it down. Talk fast." Evelyn did. Told her everything. The divorce that wasn't finalized, Cassandra's approach, the manufactured emails, the frame job. Patricia took notes, her expression never changing. "They're charging you as a co-conspirator," Patricia said when Evelyn finished. "That's federal. Serious prison time if convicted. But the case is built entirely on digital evidence, emails, phone records, financial transactions. If we can prove those were fabricated or obtained through illegal means, the whole thing collapses." "Can we prove it?" "Maybe. We'll need digital forensics experts, people who can trace the IP spoofing, prove the emails were inserted into your server rather than sent from it. That takes time. And money." "I have money." "Not if your assets are frozen, and they will be. By end of business today, every Varelli account will be locked pending investigation. You won't be able to touch a dollar of it." The implications crashed through Evelyn's exhausted brain. No money meant no legal team, no experts, no way to prove her innocence. She'd be assigned a public defender who'd be overworked and underpaid and would probably pressure her to take a plea deal. "There has to be something," Evelyn said. "Some move we can make." Patricia flipped through her notes. "We could try to get you released on bail, but given your resources, you're a flight risk. They'll argue you could disappear to any of a dozen countries with no extradition treaties. Bail will be denied or set so high even you can't pay it." "What about Victor? He's not implicated. He could access funds." "Victor Ardent was arrested 2 hours ago. Conspiracy to aid and abet. They're going after everyone connected to you, Evelyn. Scorched earth." The room tilted. Victor arrested. Assets frozen. Her entire support system dismantled in a single coordinated strike. Cassandra hadn't just framed her, she'd destroyed her completely. There's one other option, Patricia said carefully. Cooperation. If you flip on Marcus, provide evidence against him, the prosecution might be willing to deal. Reduce charges, lighter sentence. I don't have evidence against Marcus. I know he's guilty, but I can't prove. Cassandra showed you photos, the safety deposit box, the ledger. Those were obtained illegally. You said yourself any evidence from that would be thrown out, unless you independently discovered it. If you could guide investigators to that safety deposit box through some other means, make it look like a fresh lead rather than fruit of an illegal search. Evelyn stared at her lawyer. You're asking me to lie, to fabricate probable cause. I'm asking you to survive. Because right now, Evelyn, you're looking at 20 years in federal prison. Maybe more. Is your moral high ground worth that? Before Evelyn could answer, the door burst open. Agent Kessler stormed in, 2 other agents behind him. Counselor, you're interfering with our recording equipment. That jammer comes off the table now, or you'll be held in contempt. Patricia calmly removed the device. My apologies. Electronic interference was unintentional. My client and I are finished with our private consultation anyway. Good, because we have new developments. Kessler set down his tablet, pulled up a video. This was just sent to every major news outlet in the country, posted on social media, gone viral in the last 30 minutes. He hit play. The video showed Marcus Hale sitting in what looked like a hotel room, staring directly into the camera. He looked terrible, worse than he had in Evelyn's penthouse. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, like a man who'd already died inside and was just waiting for his body to catch up. My name is Marcus Hale, he said, his voice flat. And I need to tell the truth about what's been happening, about the fraud charges against Richard Voss, about the conspiracy allegations against Evelyn Varelli, about all of it. Evelyn's heart stopped. None of this was supposed to happen, Marcus continued. I made mistakes. Took money I shouldn't have taken. Tried to cover it up by framing Richard Voss for fraud. But Evelyn had nothing to do with it. She didn't conspire with me, didn't help me, didn't even know what I was doing. He pulled out documents, started showing them to the camera. Bank statements, transaction records, his handwriting documenting every theft, every lie. Cassandra Voss has been building a case against Evelyn using fabricated evidence. Emails that were never sent, phone records that were doctored. She's been using the federal investigation as a weapon to destroy the woman she blamed for her father's downfall. But Evelyn didn't cause that downfall. I did. Me. Alone. Marcus's voice cracked. I'm turning myself in, confessing to everything. Securities fraud, embezzlement, evidence tampering, all of it. But Evelyn is innocent. The evidence against her was manufactured by Cassandra Voss in an elaborate revenge scheme, and I can prove it. He held up a USB drive. Everything is on here. The real financial records. The proof that Cassandra hacked Evelyn's servers. The recording of Cassandra explaining her plan to me 3 weeks ago when she thought I was still on her side. The video ended. The interrogation room was completely silent. Kessler looked like someone had hit him with a brick. He grabbed his tablet, started making calls, barking orders. Within minutes, the room was full of people, agents, prosecutors, someone from the Department of Justice. Patricia leaned close to Evelyn. Did you know he was going to do this? No. Evelyn's voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant. I had no idea. He just saved your life, you know that, right? That confession, if it's legitimate, exonerates you completely. On Kessler's tablet, they were already pulling up the files from Marcus's USB drive, examining the evidence, running preliminary authentication checks. The room filled with urgent whispered conversations. Finally, Kessler turned back to Evelyn. His expression was carefully neutral. Miss Varelli, based on new evidence that's come to light, we're suspending your arrest pending further investigation. You're free to go. But don't leave the city. We'll have more questions. Just like that. Free to go. Patricia started gathering her things. We should leave before they change their minds. But Evelyn couldn't move, couldn't process what had just happened. Marcus had confessed, had given them everything, had destroyed himself to save her. Why? They escorted her out through a different exit, away from the cameras, away from the media circus that was building outside the main entrance. A car was waiting. Victor was in the back seat. He looked worse than she'd ever seen him, rumpled, exhausted, But when he saw her, relief washed over his face. "Thank God," he said. "When they arrested me, I thought, 'They arrested you?' 4 a.m., dragged me out of my apartment in handcuffs, held me for 3 hours before Marcus's video dropped, and they realized they'd been played." Victor handed her a tablet. "It's everywhere, every news channel, every website. Marcus Hale's confession is the biggest story in the country right now." Evelyn scrolled through the headlines. They were brutal, cascading, each one worse than the last. Financier confesses to elaborate fraud scheme. Cassandra Voss accused of framing billionaire heiress love, lies, and corporate espionage. The Virelli Hale Voss scandal. "Where's Marcus now?" Evelyn asked. "FBI has him. He turned himself in right after posting the video. He's cooperating fully, giving them everything." "And Cassandra?" Victor's expression darkened. "In the wind. She disappeared sometime last night. FBI has a warrant out for her arrest, but so far, nothing." The car pulled up to Evelyn's building. She got out, legs unsteady, and walked into the lobby. The security guards stared at her. Everyone stared at her. She was national news now. The billionaire heiress who'd been framed by her ex-husband's vengeful girlfriend. The woman at the center of a scandal that had everything: money, power, betrayal, romance. She hated it, hated every second of the attention. But she forced herself to walk with her head up, shoulders back, like none of it touched her. The elevator ride up felt like it took hours. When the doors finally opened to her penthouse, she half expected to find it trashed by the FBI. Instead, it was exactly as she'd left it. The computer still dark, the half-written email to send Marcus to prison still unsent. Victor followed her in. "You need rest, real rest, and probably a therapist. What you've been through in the last 12 hours, I need to see him." "Who?" "Marcus. I need to know why he did this." "Evelyn, that's not a good idea. He's in federal custody, being interrogated. They're not going to let you—" "Then arrange it. Use whatever leverage we have left. I don't care. I need to see him." Victor looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Evelyn's expression stopped him. "I'll make some calls." It took 6 hours. 6 hours of negotiation, legal wrangling, and calling in every favor Victor had accumulated over 30 years. But finally, they got approval for a supervised meeting at the federal detention center where Marcus was being held pending formal charges. Evelyn walked into the visiting room feeling like she was moving through a dream. The room was small, divided by thick glass, with phones on either side for communication. Marcus was already there, sitting in an orange jumpsuit that made him look smaller somehow, diminished. He picked up the phone. She picked up hers. For a long moment, they just stared at each other through the glass. "Why?" Evelyn finally asked. Marcus's laugh was bitter. "That's it? No thank you. No acknowledgement that I just burned my entire life to save yours? You didn't do it to save me. You did it to save yourself. Confessing before they caught you probably bought you a plea deal, reduced sentence. That's just smart strategy. You really believe that?" "I don't know what to believe anymore." Marcus leaned forward, pressing his palm against the glass. "I did it because you were right. About everything. I was a thief, a liar, a fraud. And the only good thing I ever had in my life, I threw away because I was too stupid and greedy to see what it was worth." "Don't," Evelyn's voice cracked. "Don't do that. Don't try to rewrite this into some redemption story. You chose this, Marcus, every step, every lie. I know, and I'll pay for it. 20 years probably, maybe more. But at least I'll pay for what I actually did, not what Cassandra tried to pin on you." "When did you know about her plan?" 3 weeks ago. She told me everything. Thought I'd help her because I hated you for destroying my life." Marcus laughed again, that same bitter sound. "And I almost did. Almost let her frame you. But then I saw the evidence she'd manufactured, saw how perfect it was, how it would destroy you completely, and I just couldn't." "Why not? You destroyed me once already." "Because destroying you by leaving was one thing. Sending you to prison for crimes you didn't commit was something else. There are lines, Evelyn. Even I have lines." She wanted to believe him, wanted to think there was something redeemable left in the man she'd married, but she'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it true. "What happens now?" she asked. I plead guilty. Cooperate fully. Give them everything they need to prosecute Cassandra. Serve my time. And you, he paused, you get to go back to your empire, your power, your life, the one you should have had all along. That's not a life. That's just existing. Maybe. But it's more than I'll have. The guard tapped his watch. Time was up. Evelyn stood. Marcus did too. I'm sorry, he said through the glass. For all of it. For every moment I made you feel small. For every time I didn't see you. I'm sorry. She nodded, couldn't speak, turned to leave. Evelyn? Marcus's voice stopped her. The divorce papers. I know you never signed them. Do you want me to file anyway? End this officially? Did she? End the marriage that had never really been a marriage? Sever the last legal tie to a man who'd betrayed her in every way possible but had also, in the end, saved her? Yes, she said. File them. End it. She walked out without looking back. The media circus outside the detention center was insane. Cameras, reporters, people shouting questions. Evelyn pushed through them, with Victor running interference, saying no comment, over and over until they reached the car. Back at the penthouse, Evelyn poured herself a drink. Then another. Then sat at her desk and stared at the dark computer screen. Her phone buzzed. News alert. Cassandra Voss apprehended at JFK Airport attempting to flee country. Another alert. Richard Voss cleared of all charges as investigation reveals frame job. Another. Varelli Industries stock soars as markets react to heir's exoneration. The pieces were falling into place. Marcus was going to prison. Cassandra was going to prison. Richard Voss was free. And Evelyn? Evelyn was exactly where she'd started. Powerful, wealthy, untouchable, and completely alone. You won, Victor said from the doorway. You realize that, right? You survived, came out stronger. That's a win. It doesn't feel like winning. It never does. Not when the cost is this high. Evelyn's phone rang. Private number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Miss Varelli? A man's voice. Unfamiliar. My name is Adrian Kaido. I'm calling on behalf of the Kaido Foundation. We're a global organization focused on sustainable development and ethical business practices. I've been following your situation with great interest. That's nice. I'm not really taking calls right now. I think you should take this one, because I have a proposition for you, one that could turn your victory into something that actually matters. Despite herself, Evelyn was curious. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Meet me tomorrow, noon, the Whitney Museum. Come alone. Why should I? Because right now, you've won a battle but lost the war. You have power and money and influence, but no purpose, no direction. You've spent the last few months destroying your enemies, and now that they're destroyed, you're empty. I can help with that. You don't know anything about me. I know you gave up an empire for love and got betrayed. I know you reclaimed that empire through ruthlessness and got framed. I know you're sitting in your penthouse right now wondering what the hell the point of any of this was. Adrian's voice was calm, certain. I know because I've been exactly where you are, and I found a way out. A way to use power for something other than revenge or profit. Meet me tomorrow. Hear what I have to say. If you're not interested, you walk away. But Evelyn, you need to hear this. The line went dead. Evelyn sat in the silence of her penthouse, staring at her phone, and felt something shift inside her, a crack in the armor she'd built, a question she hadn't let herself ask. What now? She'd gotten her revenge, destroyed the people who'd hurt her, reclaimed her empire. And she felt nothing, just empty. Maybe this Adrian Kaido had answers. Maybe he didn't. But either way, sitting here alone in this tower of glass and steel, surrounded by wealth that meant nothing and power that felt hollow, wasn't living. It was just existing, and she was so fucking tired of existing. Tell the board I'm taking a few days, she said to Victor. Personal time. They can handle things without me. Where are you going? I don't know yet, but I need to figure out what comes next, because this? She gestured around the penthouse. This isn't it. Victor nodded. Take all the time you need. The Empire will still be here when you get back. Would she come back? Evelyn honestly didn't know. She walked to the windows, looked out at the city below. Millions of people living their lives, chasing their dreams, making their mistakes. None of them knew her name. None of them cared about her empire or her revenge or her victory. They were just living. And somewhere in that vast, indifferent city was a man named Adrian Kaido, who claimed he could show her how to turn power into purpose. Maybe he could. Maybe he couldn't. But standing at these windows, looking out at a city that had watched her rise and fall and rise again, Evelyn made a decision. Tomorrow, she'd meet him. Tomorrow, she'd find out if there was something beyond revenge. Tomorrow, she'd start looking for a reason to keep fighting that wasn't about destroying someone else. But tonight she stood at the top of her empire, victorious and hollow, and let herself feel every bit of the emptiness she'd been running from. Let herself grieve the woman she'd been 7 years ago who'd believed in love. Let herself mourn the man Marcus could have been if he'd been brave enough to be honest. Let herself acknowledge that winning wasn't the same as being whole. And when the tears finally came, hot and bitter and long overdue, she didn't fight them. She just stood there and cried for everything she'd lost in the pursuit of everything she'd won. Outside, the city glittered like broken glass catching light. Inside, Evelyn Varelli finally let herself break too. And in that breaking, something new began to form. Something that might, eventually, look like healing. But that was tomorrow's fight. Tonight, she just needed to survive the victory. And hope that when the sun rose, she'd still recognize the woman staring back at her in the mirror. The woman who'd burned down the world to prove she existed, and now had to figure out if existence was enough. Or if somewhere buried under all the rage and power and carefully constructed armor, there was still a person worth being. Someone who could build instead of destroy. Someone who could live instead of just survive. The tears dried eventually. They always did. Evelyn washed her face, changed into clean clothes, and tried to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept replaying everything. Marcus's confession, Cassandra's arrest, the moment she'd stood in that interrogation room, thinking her life was over. By the time dawn broke over Manhattan, she'd given up on rest entirely. She made coffee, stood at the windows, and watched the city wake up. Somewhere down there, people were starting their days with normal problems. Traffic, deadlines, what to make for dinner. Simple human concerns that felt alien to her now. Her phone buzzed. Text from Victor. Board meeting at 8 a.m. They want to see you. Show of solidarity after the scandal. She texted back. Cancel it. I have somewhere else to be. The Whitney Museum at noon. Adrian Kaido. A proposition that could turn victory into something that mattered. She had 5 hours to kill. 5 hours to figure out if she even wanted to hear what this stranger had to say. Part of her wanted to ignore the whole thing, bury herself in work, rebuild the walls she'd let crack last night. It would be easier, safer. The empire needed her attention. The board needed reassurance. Markets needed stability. But another part of her, the part that had cried alone in the dark, the part that recognized the emptiness for what it was, knew that going back to business as usual would be a slow death. She'd won the war and lost herself in the process. And if she didn't find a way to reconnect with something real, something meaningful, she'd spend the rest of her life in this gilded cage she'd built. At 11:30, she left the penthouse. No driver, no security. Just her, walking through Manhattan like a normal person. People rushed past her on the sidewalk, too busy with their own lives to notice the billionaire heiress in jeans and a simple sweater. It felt strange, liberating, like being invisible again. The Whitney was quiet on a Tuesday afternoon. Tourists wandered through the galleries, contemplating art they'd forget by dinner. Evelyn climbed to the 5th floor where the outdoor terrace overlooked the High Line and the Hudson River beyond. Adrian Kaido was already there. He stood near the railing, staring out at the water. Mid-40s, maybe. Japanese features. Simple clothes, dark jeans, a gray sweater, no logos, no flash. He turned when he heard her approach, and his eyes were the kind that had seen things. Real things. Not boardroom battles or market manipulation, but actual human suffering. Miss Varelli, he said. His voice was the same calm certainty from the phone. Thank you for coming. You said you had answers. I'm here for answers. Not answers. Questions. He gestured to the view. Beautiful, isn't it? All that water, all that movement. It goes where it needs to go. following laws older than human civilization. No malice, no revenge, just flow. I didn't come here for a philosophy lesson. No. You came because you're drowning and you don't know how to swim anymore. Adrian turned to face her fully. You spent 7 years pretending to be someone you weren't. Then you spent 3 months being exactly who you are, powerful, ruthless, effective, and discovered that person is hollow. Now you're standing at a crossroads wondering which version was real. The accuracy stung. You don't know anything about me. I know everything about you. I've lived your exact story, just with different details. Adrian pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. This was me 10 years ago. The photo showed a younger Adrian standing in front of what looked like a massive factory complex. Expensive suit, confident smile. The look of a man who owned the world. I inherited my family's manufacturing empire when I was 32, Adrian continued. Electronics, semiconductors, factories across Southeast Asia. We made components for every major tech company in the world. I was worth $40 billion, had more power than most governments in the region. What happened? I discovered we were using child labor in 3 of our facilities. Not directly, through subcontractors who lied on their audits. But the children were there, 9, 10 years old, working 16-hour shifts in conditions that would make prison look comfortable. His voice never changed, but something dark flickered in his eyes. When I found out, I had a choice. Shut down those facilities, lose billions, face lawsuits and investigations. Or bury it. Pay off the right people. Continue making money. Evelyn waited. I buried it, Adrian said quietly. For 6 months, I buried it. Told myself it wasn't my fault, wasn't my responsibility, that this was just how business worked in that part of the world. And every night, I went to sleep in my penthouse knowing there were children working themselves to death so I could maintain my profit margins. What changed? One of them died. 12-year-old girl. Collapsed from exhaustion and malnutrition. I saw her photo, saw her name, and something broke inside me. Adrian put his phone away. I shut down every facility using child labor, took the financial hit, faced the investigations, lost $20 billion in 18 months. My board tried to remove me. My family disowned me. The media called me either a saint or an idiot, depending on which outlet you read. Which were you? Neither. I was just a man trying to live with himself. Adrian turned back to the water. I dissolved the company, sold everything, used the money to create a foundation focused on ethical manufacturing, worker protections, sustainable development. Real change, not just writing checks to ease guilt. And for the first time in my life, I could sleep at night. Evelyn studied him. You think I'm you? You think I need to dissolve my empire and become some kind of corporate humanitarian? No. I think you need to decide what you're actually fighting for. Right now you're fighting because fighting is all you know. Revenge gave you purpose, but revenge is finite. It ends. And then you're left with power you don't know how to use and money that doesn't mean anything. So what's your proposition? Adrian reached into his bag, pulled out a folder. The Kaido Foundation is launching a new initiative, Global Ethical Business Standards. We're partnering with major corporations to completely restructure how they operate, supply chains, labor practices, environmental impact, everything. We need companies with real influence, real reach, companies like Varelli Industries. He handed her the folder. Inside were proposals, frameworks, implementation strategies. It was comprehensive, ambitious, and would require fundamentally changing how her entire empire operated. This would cost billions, Evelyn said, flipping through the documents. Restructuring supply chains, implementing new labor standards, environmental compliance, the profit margins would tank. Short term, yes. Long term, you'd be positioned as the leader in ethical business. The company that proved you can make money without destroying people or the planet. That's worth more than quarterly earnings. To who? To you. If you actually want your life to mean something beyond accumulating wealth and crushing enemies. Evelyn closed the folder, stared out at the Hudson. The water was gray today, choppy with wind. Ships moved slowly through it, carrying cargo she'd never think about, supporting economies she'd never see. Why me? She asked. You could partner with any major corporation, Why approach someone who just spent 3 months using her power for revenge? Because you're questioning it. Because you stood in your penthouse last night and cried over the emptiness of winning. Because you're here, talking to a stranger, instead of sitting in a board meeting pretending everything is fine. Adrian's voice softened. I've watched you, Evelyn. Read every article. Followed every move. You're brilliant and ruthless and capable of incredible things. The question is whether you'll use that brilliance to build or just to destroy. What if I like destroying? What if that's who I actually am? Then you'll go back to your empire, make more money, crush more enemies, and die alone in a penthouse, wondering why none of it ever felt like enough. Adrian started walking toward the exit. Or you can take this folder, read it carefully, and decide if maybe there's a version of Evelyn Varelli who could change the world instead of just burning it down. Your choice. He left her standing on the terrace with the folder in her hands and the wind pulling at her hair. Evelyn stood there for a long time. An hour, maybe more. Reading through Adrian's proposals, thinking about child workers in factories, thinking about Marcus in prison, thinking about the woman she'd been 7 years ago who'd walked away from all this because she'd wanted to be loved for who she was, not what she owned. That woman had been naive, foolish. She'd given up everything for a man who'd seen her as disposable. But she'd also been human, real, connected to something beyond quarterly earnings and hostile takeovers. Evelyn pulled out her phone, called Victor. I need you to set up a meeting with the board, she said. Tomorrow morning. Full attendance mandatory. What are you planning? Something that's going to make them very unhappy, but it's happening anyway. She hung up before Victor could ask more questions, walked out of the museum and caught a cab back to the penthouse. Spent the rest of the day preparing, running numbers, building projections, creating a presentation that would either transform Varelli Industries or get her removed as CEO. By midnight, she was ready. The board meeting started at 8 a.m. sharp. 12 men who'd tried to run her empire in her absence, who'd gotten comfortable making decisions without her, who'd signed new contracts that locked them into the old way of doing business. Evelyn walked in carrying nothing but a tablet and the weight of a decision that would change everything. Gentlemen, she said, taking her seat at the head of the table, we're restructuring completely. Every division, every operation, every supplier relationship, all of it. Gerald Hastings leaned back in his chair. That's a rather dramatic announcement without any context. Here's your context. Varelli Industries is going to become the global leader in ethical business practices. We're implementing new labor standards across our entire supply chain, auditing every facility we work with, cutting ties with any supplier who uses child labor, unsafe conditions, or exploitative practices. We're also committing to carbon neutrality within 5 years and transparent financial reporting that exceeds legal requirements. The silence in the room was deafening. Thomas Brennan found his voice first. Have you lost your mind? Do you have any idea what that would cost? Approximately $18 billion over the next 3 years. I've run the numbers. $18 billion? Gerald's face had gone red. That would destroy our profit margins, tank our stock price. We'd lose investors, market share, competitive advantage. We'd also gain the moral high ground, consumer trust, a workforce that's actually treated like human beings instead of production units. Evelyn pulled up her presentation. I've analyzed 3 comparable companies that made similar transitions. Initial stock decline of 20 to 30%, followed by steady growth and market dominance within 5 years. Consumers are willing to pay premium prices for ethically produced goods. We'd be positioned to capture that market. Or we'd be positioned to go bankrupt while our competitors eat our lunch, Thomas shot back. This is insanity. This is evolution. The world is changing. Companies that don't adapt will be left behind, and I'd rather lead that change than get crushed by it. Gerald stood up. I'm calling for a vote to remove Evelyn Varelli as CEO on grounds of gross incompetence and reckless endangerment of shareholder value. Around the table, heads nodded. Evelyn had expected this, had prepared for it. You can call that vote, she said calmly, but I should remind you that I own 63% of this company. My vote alone exceeds the entire board combined. So unless you can somehow convince me to vote against myself, your motion fails. There are other ways to remove a CEO, Gerald said. Legal challenges, shareholder lawsuits. We can tie this up in court for years. You could try. But while you're filing lawsuits, I'll be implementing these changes. Because as majority shareholder and sitting CEO, I have that authority. You can fight me, waste time and money on legal battles you'll eventually lose, or you can get on board with the future of this company. Evelyn looked at each of them. Your choice. But the restructuring is happening either way. More silence. She could see them calculating, trying to find an angle, a loophole, some way to stop this. They wouldn't find one. She'd made sure of that. Finally, Gerald sat back down. If we go along with this suicide mission, what do you need from us? Your resignation, all of you. The room erupted. Voices raised, fists hitting the table, accusations flying. Evelyn waited for the noise to die down. I'm not firing you without cause, she said once she could be heard again. I'm restructuring the entire executive team. You'll all receive generous severance packages, recommendations, connections to other positions. But this company needs leadership that actually believes in what we're doing. People who see workers as human beings, not line items. Who understand that sustainable business practices aren't just marketing, they're survival. And where exactly are you going to find these mythical executives? Gerald asked bitterly. Some I'll recruit from the foundation I'm partnering with. Some I'll promote from within. People who've been stuck in middle management because they cared more about doing the right thing than climbing the ladder. In some positions, I'll fill myself until I find the right people. You're going to run every division personally? If I have to, for a while. Evelyn stood up. The paperwork for your severance packages will be ready by end of day. I expect your resignations on my desk by tomorrow morning. This meeting is adjourned. She walked out before anyone could mount another protest. Victor was waiting outside the boardroom, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the last 12 hours. That was brutal, he said. It was necessary. They're not going to go quietly. Gerald's already texting his lawyers. You're going to be fighting legal battles for months. Let them fight. I'll win. Evelyn kept walking toward her office. Because I'm right, Victor, and they know it. The old way of doing business is dying. We adapt or we die with it. And if this doesn't work, if the restructuring costs more than projected, if consumers don't actually care about ethics as much as we hope, if the whole thing collapses, Evelyn stopped, turned to face him. Then at least I'll have tried to do something that mattered. I spent 7 years being nobody, 3 months being powerful for the sake of power. I'm not doing either anymore. I'm building something real, something that will last beyond quarterly earnings and stock prices. Victor studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. Your father would either be very proud or very horrified. I can't decide which. Maybe both. That's how you know you're doing something worth doing. The restructuring took 6 months. 6 months of brutal work, 18-hour days, constant fights with regulators and investors, and old guard executives who saw her vision as corporate suicide. The stock price did tank, 32% in the first quarter. Investors screamed. Analysts predicted doom. Evelyn kept pushing forward. She partnered with Adrian's foundation, brought in experts who actually knew how to audit supply chains and implement ethical labor practices. Fired suppliers who wouldn't meet new standards, ate the costs, rebuilt from the ground up, and slowly, painfully slowly, it started working. The first major victory came when a documentary filmmaker was granted access to their factories. She'd expected a hit piece, waited for the other shoe to drop. Instead, the documentary showed workers in safe conditions, earning fair wages, with access to healthcare and education for their children. It went viral. Suddenly, Virelli Industries wasn't just another corporation. It was a model for what ethical business could look like. Consumer sentiment shifted. People started actively seeking out products made by Virelli subsidiaries, willing to pay premium prices for goods they knew weren't made by exploited workers. The stock price stabilized, then started climbing. By month 8, they'd recovered the initial losses. By month 12, they were exceeding pre-restructuring valuations. The board, the new board, filled with people who actually believed in what they were building, presented her with projections showing continued growth. Sustainable growth, the kind that didn't require destroying people to achieve. Evelyn sat in her office late one night, staring at those projections, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness, not satisfaction, just quiet peace. The knowledge that she was building something that would outlast her, something that mattered. Her phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. Congratulations on the turnaround, told you it was possible. Adrian. She smiled, typed back, "Thank you for everything." His response came quickly. "Have dinner with me. Not business, just dinner." Evelyn stared at the message, started to type a polite refusal, stopped, deleted it. "When?" she sent instead. "Tomorrow, 7 p.m. I'll send details." She set down her phone and realized her heart was beating faster. Not with fear or anxiety or the adrenaline of corporate warfare, with something that felt almost like anticipation. When was the last time she'd had dinner with someone just for the sake of it? Not networking, not strategy, just human connection. 7 years ago, with Marcus. And look how that had ended. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she'd spent so long protecting herself from being hurt again that she'd forgotten how to actually live. How to take risks that weren't calculated. How to trust someone without needing leverage or insurance policies. The next evening, she met Adrian at a small restaurant in the West Village. Nothing fancy, no photographers, no scene, just good food and quiet conversation. "You look different," Adrian said when she sat down. "Lighter, somehow." "I feel different. Turns out doing actual good in the world is better than just making money." "Shocking revelation, I know." He poured wine for both of them. "How's the board taking it?" "The new board loves it. The old board is still filing lawsuits, but they're losing. Turns out judges don't look favorably on executives trying to prevent a company from implementing ethical practices. Gerald Hastings is particularly bitter from what I've heard." "Gerald can be bitter. He made $40 million in severance. He'll survive." Evelyn took a sip of wine. "What about you? How's the foundation?" "Growing. We just signed partnerships with 3 more major corporations. Your success with Betrayal Industries has made it easier to convince others that ethical business is viable." Adrian smiled. "You're becoming a case study. The billionaire who chose purpose over profit and proved they weren't mutually exclusive." "I didn't choose purpose over profit. I chose a different kind of profit, one that doesn't require stepping on people to achieve." "Even better. That's a message more CEOs will listen to." They talked for hours. Not about business, not entirely. About other things, too. Books they'd read, places they'd traveled. The strange isolation that came with inherited wealth. The weight of knowing you had the power to change lives and the responsibility that created. Evelyn found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months, maybe years. Adrian was easy to talk to. He didn't want anything from her. Wasn't angling for a deal or trying to climb social ladders. He was just present. Actually listening. Actually interested in what she thought, not what she could do for him. When dinner ended, he walked her out to the street where her car was waiting. "Thank you," she said, "for dinner, for the partnership, for showing me there was a way out of the hole I'd dug. You would have found it eventually. I just pointed in a direction." Adrian hesitated, then, "Would you like to do this again? Dinner. No agenda, just this." Evelyn felt that flutter in her chest again. Anticipation mixed with caution. The scar tissue from Marcus's betrayal wasn't gone. Might never be gone. But maybe it didn't have to stop her from trying. "Yes," she said. "I'd like that." His smile was genuine, warm. "Good. I'll call you." She got in the car, and as the driver pulled away from the curb, she looked back. Adrian was still standing there, hands in his pockets, watching her leave. Not possessive, not demanding, just there. It felt different than it had with Marcus. Safer, more real. Maybe that was because she was different now, stronger, more certain of who she was. She didn't need someone to complete her or validate her existence. Didn't need romance to prove she mattered, but that didn't mean she couldn't want it, on her own terms, with someone who saw her clearly and chose to stay anyway. 6 months later, Betrayal Industries released their annual report. Profits were up 18%. Worker satisfaction across all facilities had increased by 43%. They'd achieved carbon neutrality 2 years ahead of schedule, and consumer trust ratings had put them in the top 5 most respected corporations globally. The media called it the Betrayal miracle, the transformation of a cutthroat corporation into a model of ethical business. Evelyn called it what it was, hard work, and the decision to stop destroying and start building. She was sitting in her office reviewing the report when Victor knocked on the door. "Package for you," he said. "Just arrived." He handed her a small box. No return address. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph. Marcus Hale in prison orange, standing in what looked like a facility workshop. He was teaching a class. She could see other inmates seated around him, taking notes. He looked older, thinner. But there was something in his expression that she'd never seen before. Accountability. Maybe even peace. A note was tucked under the photo. Marcus's handwriting. Evelyn, I'm teaching financial literacy to other inmates, helping them understand money management so when they get out, they don't end up back here. It's not redemption, not even close, but it's something. I wanted you to know I'm trying to be better than I was, that your refusal to save me was the best thing that ever happened to me. I hope you found whatever you were looking for. You deserved better than me. Always did. Marcus. Evelyn stared at the note for a long time, felt a knot in her chest loosen. She didn't forgive him. Wasn't sure she ever would. But she could acknowledge that people could change, could grow, could become something other than their worst moments. She put the photo and note in her desk drawer, closed it. That chapter was done. Her phone buzzed. Text from Adrian. Still on for tonight? There's an art gallery opening I think you'd like. She typed back. Absolutely. Pick me up at 7? His response? It's a date. Evelyn set down her phone and walked to the windows. The city spread out below her, massive and indifferent and beautiful. Somewhere down there, millions of people were living their lives, working in factories she'd made safer, using products she'd made ethical, building futures she'd made possible by choosing to do better. She'd started this journey wanting revenge, wanting to hurt the people who'd hurt her, wanting to prove she was powerful and untouchable and didn't need anyone. And she'd gotten all of that, the revenge, the power, the proof. But somewhere along the way, she discovered that none of it mattered compared to actually using that power for something beyond her own satisfaction. That being untouchable was just another word for being alone. That the only thing worse than being destroyed by someone else was destroying yourself in the pursuit of destroying them. She'd burned down her old life, built an empire, nearly lost everything. And through it all, she'd learned that the real power wasn't in the money or the influence or the ability to crush enemies. It was in choosing what kind of person you became when you had all that power. Choosing to build instead of destroy. Choosing to heal instead of hurt. Choosing to believe that maybe, possibly, you could have both strength and softness, power and purpose, success and actual human connection. The empire remained, stronger than ever. But now, for the first time, so did she. Not Evelyn Ward, the woman who'd hidden who she was for love. Not Evelyn Varelli, the ruthless heiress who'd burned everything in pursuit of revenge. Just Evelyn. Whole and flawed and still figuring it out, but no longer hollow. She'd won the war by realizing the war was never really about Marcus or Cassandra or proving anything to anyone else. It was about proving to herself that she could survive losing everything and still choose to be someone worth knowing. Someone who could look in the mirror and recognize the woman staring back. Someone who could build an empire without losing her humanity. Someone who could be powerful without being alone. The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Beautiful and temporary, like everything else. Evelyn watched it for a moment, then turned away from the window, grabbed her coat, and headed for the elevator. She had an art gallery to visit, a partner who saw her clearly and stayed anyway, a company to run that was changing the world one ethical decision at a time. She had a life, a real one, messy and complicated and imperfect, but hers. Finally, completely, irrevocably hers. And as the elevator descended toward a city full of possibility and danger and everything in between, Evelyn Varelli smiled, not because she'd won, but because she'd survived. And survival, she'd learned, was just the beginning. The real victory was what you chose to do with it. She chose to live.